Welcome everyone to open mic number 256. We're going to be talking about case facts and Brendan and Stephen's trials. Today was Brendan and Stephen's rally, so this is considered the after rally party, I guess. Lisa Sagowski had, we've been talking, I know Duke's talked to her, and I think Doc has, about presenting some things in the case that we've been after for years and years. So that's what we're going to do. Um, Pose some questions, talk about things that we know, maybe even speculate a little bit. I know I'm going to. It's just my opinion, but I'm not asking anyone to agree with it. I'm just saying. Anyway, I want to introduce Doc and Duke. Doc?
Thank you so much, Jack61. Yeah, today's a very special day, and thank you so much, Jack, for putting this on. And it's good to be back, and great to see everybody in chat. And welcome to Duke and yourself and everybody else. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Doc. Duke, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, and yeah, it's good to be here. I was a little bummed that I couldn't get over to the rally in person. You know, I'm not too far, just a few hours over in Minnesota away from it, but that didn't work out, so I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk a little bit more about the case. For those of you who haven't heard me or seen me around in a while, you have for sure probably seen my name and face pop up on Ken Kratz's Twitter account. But you know, all jokes aside, I think it's good to just be able to talk about the case. It's good for me to have a platform where, you know, I can talk without worrying about Ken Kratz interrupting me or trying to manipulate the information. So I'm looking forward to tonight, looking forward to the discussion, and yeah.
Good to see you, Duke.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to, you know, at least join us here on the, you know, and presenting some things that, you know, I think go to the heart of a lot of this. There are a lot of areas, guys, we could talk all night, but we're not going to. I picked a few things. They're not all the same thing. I'm going to show some documents, but we're not going to do a ton of reading or anything like that. This is more for information and discussion, at least my part of it. Duke's got some things he's got prepared, and so does Doc. So, Duke, you want to start off? You want me to start? Doc said he's fine with going last. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and my portion too is really, you know, I wanna have a discussion. I talk a lot about this issue. I've written posts on Reddit about it. I speak a lot about it on my Twitter X account, because I do feel like once I really got involved in this case and diving deep into the facts, the reports, the trial transcripts, all the evidence, really everything that we could possibly have on it, the one thing out of all of it for me that stuck out was item BZ. And I know, like I said, I've talked about it here with Foul Play before, and I've posted a lot about it, but I think it's worth, on a day like today where there's this rally going around and there is some attention back onto this case, I think it's important to discuss, you know, what we feel is important for people to know. And so, yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, you know, talk through BZ a little bit more. You know, I think there's some intricacies within this discussion that are new to certain people. And again, the purpose of this is really to just generate some questions. So I'm hoping that people, both you, Jack and Doc, we can kind of bounce off each other ideas and thoughts, but also in the chat, if there's people that have questions or ideas. Because of how the state handled this case, it does take a collective effort of minds to try to put us in a direction that makes the most sense. And unfortunately, you know, given the fact that it was handled so poorly, we're never going to know for sure what happened. And that's really frustrating. because as much as we want to, as hard as we try, we cannot get to the root of what happened because of how poorly this investigation was handled. So yeah. Why don't I just start? And I guess, Jack, I probably should have sent you a picture of BZ, but I didn't want to have an image of remains up for 45 minutes or whatever.
Well, if you want to put it on Discord, I can pop it up there, or you can just, if you can, I don't know if you're on mobile or not, but you can share it in Streamyard, and I can show it either way.
Sure. I might show you an image on Discord here, and then maybe while I do that quickly, Doc, or both of you guys, we've talked a lot about BZ. To you, when I mention item BZ, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you two? What's something that stands out the most about that item, as you guys think of it?
Jack, you want to go first?
You talking about BZ?
Yeah.
It's hard, but I mean, it's really hard because we know so much more now. I don't know that I can lay a one single thing up, but I guess maybe the biggest single thing that jumps out first is, how did Earl miss it?
Mm-hmm.
How did he miss it? And then it wasn't found, for 2 days, and it wasn't even found by him. It was found by someone else. So then you got a chain of custody issue that I have a problem with. There are other things that go along with that too, that you've talked about. When Sturdivant and Strauss showed up on November 8th at that pit, a lot of people kind of forget about Strauss because she's not, she didn't really testify about it like Sturdivant did. He fell on his sword because of his actions. And his actions, again, go into another part of this. So, not trying to stop you from talking. I'm just saying that it's really difficult for me to just lay the line on one thing. But again, because of the work that you did, Doc did, showing how big this piece was, BZ, how did Earl miss it? Come on.
Yep. I mean, for me, I remember when you did the presentation, Duke, I think it was last year or it could have even been before that, when you did the presentation about the sifting, the actual sifting protocol. It really opened up my eyes, because item BZ is one of the most critical pieces of forensic evidence in this case. It's so important. And there are so many issues surrounding item BZ, which I know you're going to be talking about. And it's so crucial. What was so crucial about item BZ is, to echo what Jack 61 said, is how such the largest piece of bone could really be missed by so many people. When you consider that the actual burn pit, Stephen Avery's burn pit, was the size of a table, was very, very small. And you've got item BZ, which is not only bone, but also muscle, pieces of muscle tissue. Yeah, as you can see on the screen here, and I know Duke will talk more about it. And there was a lot of shenanigans going around with item BZ. And I know you'll be talking about it, Duke. And remember, this is the only piece of information, forensic information, in which they were able to get a partial DNA profile that proved that the muscle tissue had belonged to Teresa Hallbach, right?
Correct.
The only one. And it's interesting that Dr. Eisenberg said that the whole item BZ appeared to be relatively unburnt.
Mm-hmm.
So it appears, and I echo with what you found, Duke, it appears that item BZ did not come from the burn pit, but very likely came from another source. So there's a lot of intrigue regarding item BZ through the handling of it, the fact that it also was analyzed by the FBI as well. Mm-hmm. And I think your work and your analysis is so crucial in, I believe, in showing the shenanigans that took place. And I agree with what you said and also with what Jack said. We may never know what happened because the way the forensic evidence has been handled, so badly handled in this case, we may never know. But the whole central shenanigan piece starts with Stephen Avery's burn pit. No, I can't wait for your presentation, Duke.
Oh, sorry. Neither can my dogs, apparently. You touched on it perfectly, Doc, right? And this is what the focal point to me is this. Item BZ was the single and only piece of human remains that they were able to have some form of DNA profile link to Teresa Halbach. So in my mind, what Ken Kratz did, how it was used by them was to say these bones came from the pit. The pit is Stevens. He burned her. And the only piece that we were able to test at the time was this one piece of muscle tissue. So because it came from the burn pit, therefore all the other bones that we found in this case were hers as well. And I know that there's also supportive evidence based on, it being a young adult female. However, if the prosecution had gone to trial with just, we found relatively young adult female bones, personally speaking, if they couldn't conclusively say that those were Teresa's, they would have had a much harder time convicting Stephen Avery, for sure. Right?
Correct. But you also touched upon something very, very important here. Out of all the sites where bones were found, cut, burnt human remains, the only sample of tissue, muscle tissue, allegedly comes from Stephen Avery's burn pit. So it's interesting that only item BZ contains surviving muscle tissue. In all the other locations where human cremains have been found, no other tissue has been found, correct? The only sample of tissue is right there in that picture, item BZ, allegedly, right? And it's remarkable that you just happen to have a surviving piece of muscle tissue in what Kratz is presenting as a great big whopping fire that lasted for 6 hours plus. It's truly remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah, it is.
Duke pointed out something really interesting, and I'd noticed it before, but I didn't really, hammer on it at any time. But the difference he talked about a minute ago, the physical difference in how BZ looks compared to the rest of the bones in that box. It's different, and there's no way around that.
Yes, but sorry, Jake.
Yeah, no, great point, Jack. And this is one of those points in the road where I got to, and I said, okay, it's very distinctly different. And when we say BZ is different, it's hard to put that into context unless you're looking at an image like this, because when we say BZ, we're not talking about one piece. We're talking about a collection.
A collection
that includes some relatively, based on what they found in this case, relatively large pieces, over or close to 2 inches, as well as some pretty tiny fragments.
Yeah.
And if there is a way, Jack, to zoom in on that image, I don't know if there is or not.
I probably can't do it on this one, but I know where I can get it. Give me just 1 second, and I'll get that.
And so one of the things that stands out to me is even those tiny fragments within item BZ here, there is a uniformity as far as their level of or their degree of burnness. It's clear that these items were burned together, because even if you look at one of the tiniest pieces, you'll see the relatively same color and texture as you do in these larger pieces here. So one of the things that's always been fascinating to me when I talk about item BZ is people that believe in the guilt of Stephen and Brennan, the state advocates, what they'll say is the reason item BZ was overlooked on November the 8th, because we have to remember it wasn't collected with the rest of the bones on November 8th. It was found inside of a tarp on November 10th at the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. And the reason is, in their minds, someone must have, in a hurry, grabbed item BZ and tossed it onto the tarp. And that is how they explain it. And good for them, that's how they explain it. But here's where I have a really hard time with that, is that if that were to happen, let's just take them at their word and say that's what happened. It's hard to believe, but let's believe for a second that someone grabbed item BZ and tossed it into the tarp instead of collecting it with the rest of the potential remains that they were looking for. If that were the case, you would expect, without any question, there to be some mixture or some items that look and are burnt to the relatively same degree as we see here in item BZ in the box of bones that was collected. There is a 0.0% chance that every single tiny piece that was burnt to this degree, which is significantly different than all the other bones, just so happened to be overlooked on November the 8th. It is impossible to believe that. So the only logical conclusion to come to is that this item that we're looking at here right now was not in Stephen Avery's burn pit on November the 8th when that burn pit was sifted by John Ertl, his team, Jason Jost, Sipple for a minute, but the team that was there to sift that burn pit, the items that you're looking at now were not in there at the time.
Correct. You cannot look, for example, and you really hit a very, very important point. I remember when you did your presentation regarding the sifting screens, and I also did measurements of the bone fragments and the muscle fragments in situ. Remember those pictures with the actual rulers?
Yep.
Using their own ruler? So we know the actual dimensions and sizes of those fragments, and they match perfectly with what Dr. Eisenberg reported.
That's correct.
Which means you've now got a huge problem. You can't account for the larger fragments going through the sifting screens, right? Mm-hmm. But you've got more of a problem. It's not the large fragments that are the problem. It's the small ones.
Yes.
Right? The small ones, look at some of those tiny bone fragments. They potentially could have gone through a sifting screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So how can you have one collection of muscle, desiccated muscle tissue, a large bone fragment together with tiny bone fragments and what appears to be like ash? The whole collection makes no sense from a sifting point of view. There is no way anyone would have hand-picked those items threw them on a tarp. It makes no sense. Why? Because Ertl had a sifting screen or screens to sift the material that came out of the burn pit. Remember, and you've gone through it, Duke, they picked up the ash with a shovel, small shovel, and placed it on the sifting screen. And what they do, they use their hand or they shake the sifter to get the material to come through.
Yep.
There is no way you can account for that collection that appears to be very unburnt. And these are the words by Dr. Eisenberg, who had examined them. And you made a very good point. When you look at the box of bones show bones that are heavily burnt, including fragments that are calcined, which means they've been exposed to very, very high and extreme heat. Duke, Jack, and anyone in chat, how can you account for one combustion event whereby you get bones which have been calcined, and in the same combustion event, you've got desiccated muscle tissue that has survived.
I mean, to,
I got no
I mean,
answer.
to me, just in talking to two different people that basically firemen, and a vast amount of reading. I didn't just take one opinion, knowing that it's going to take approximately 1,500 degrees that if you could reach that, which you probably could in a burn barrel. I'm sure you could actually, especially if you had a leaf blower or something blowing on it to drive your heat up, and you had oxygen and you had enough fuel to throw on it.
Yep.
But understanding that that's what had to occur, and then going back and looking at what Sturdivant did after it was reported, him and Strauss show up, and the actions that he took, he literally destroyed that pit. He destroyed it.
Yes.
No photos taken that we were aware of.
Yes.
Drug that wire out of it. I mean, to me, it was to rearrange what was seen there that they saw. That I'm just, again, that's opinion. I can't prove any of it. But there's
no, you don't have to prove it. He actually said it. He actually said it.
That's right. He drugged that wire out and then left it there. It was so important that he do all this, and then he just left the stuff there.
Correct. Sturdivant actually modified the burn pit. He actually raked it. He actually raked it. And by modifying the burn pit, you now have got no idea how the bones, how the cremains, how the body, the anatomical structure has been completely destroyed. And what is very infuriating, and I'm sure Duke will back me up on this, is that Kratz in his book showed a very close-up picture of bone fragments entwined in wire.
Yeah.
And I remember Duke and myself when I was talking to Kratz. I'm no longer on X anymore, and that was a conscious decision to delete my account. I had enough of the crap that I saw there, right? How can you present a picture in a book showing an amorphic piece of material that could well be insulation? Because remember how much insulation that they found in the surrounding grass and area like that. How can you show a picture like that with no scale, no sense of perspective, no sense of size, and say these are bone fragments entwined in tire wire, insinuating that Teresa was burnt using tires as an accelerant? You never, in no scientific journal, could you ever present crap like that with no scale, no sense of dimensions.
And again, he rolled that wire around in that burn pit. There's all kinds of shit could have ended up in there.
Yep. Now, why would Sturdivant rake up the tire wire into a ball and leave it there if it contained bone fragments?
That's right.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
No,
it doesn't. It's interesting, and one of the things that I've, I think we had how long ago was it? A few months ago, we had another dump of DCI documents that came out.
October 24.
Yeah. And, I started there was this one report I'd kind of been waiting on that we were denied originally that finally came out, but it's another kind of avenue to explore here. And Tom Sturdivant is at the heart of this portion as well. But one of the things I never looked too hard into is if you look at the report, I don't have it. I'm sorry, I don't have it to pull up for you guys here. But if you look at the report from Calumet County, it's written by Rick Reamer, who is their evidence custodian, right? He's the one that's collecting the evidence in this case and then documenting it in a report. He talks about the evening of the 8th and collecting a lot of different pieces of evidence from Ertl, who had not only the infamous box of bones, from his burn pit sifting, but he also had the contents of what he found in the burn barrels as well. And it's interesting that in Reamer's report, it talks about the timing of, hey, I received this piece of evidence, this piece of evidence, the burn pit evidence. And then there's about almost an hour-long gap. And then the last thing in his report is he says he received the tarp that BZ was eventually found in. And I never paid too much attention to that odd gap, right? Like, why did Reamer get all of the evidence and then an hour went by before he received 7923, which was the tarp in which item BZ was eventually found in 2 days later. So I don't know if you guys know this, but Ertl did not turn over the tarp. The tarp that was used to catch debris that fell through the sifting screens and then to be re-examined later, that was collected and I guess taken care of by Sturdivant. He decided to take care of that, not Ertl, and then turn it into Reamer. The issue is that the timing in which he turned it into Reamer was about 6:30 p.m. So it was about an hour and a half after the burn pit sifting had concluded. And thankfully, we have the sign in and sign out logs of the Avery property. And in that window, we have Strauss and Sturdivant leaving the property for about 18 minutes before returning. And then at that point, this tarp was turned in to Reamer. So if you know anything about chain of custody, you know that window, that gap, is all you need in this case to tell, a jury or the court that the evidence within that tarp is unreliable because there is no documented chain of custody, one, of any remains in this case, which is wild. But two, you actually have the person who is in charge or, presumably responsible for that tarp full of debris leaving the property for 18 minutes. We have no idea where he went or what he did, but when he returned, he then turned over that tarp. And the way that they labeled it was a tarp full of debris from Stevens burn pit. But how the hell do we know that? We don't. That's the issue.
Yeah. And I think that really goes to the heart of the issue. In a lot of the cases that I've been studying, it is the forensics that are being hammered by the defense. Where's your chain of command? Where's your chain of evidence? How do you know this goes with that? What have you done? What type of documentation have you done? One thing that is for sure about this particular case in particular is that you find nothing in situ. There are no in situ photographs as far as I'm aware. Duke, Jack, I don't know whether you know anything different of Stephen Avery's burn pit. No. There is no video evidence. There is no proper documentation. Basically, what you've got is a box of bones and a tarp. And trust me, bro, that's what it is. Trust me, bro. This is the box of bones. This is the bones that we got from the sifting of the burn pit. Oh, by the way, this is the tarp that we got from the sifting process, right? There is no documentation. Whereas I think if you look at the Farris case, in which that lady and others killed her husband and cremated him, did you look at the documentation of that burn pit? Unbelievable. Mm-hmm. There are hundreds of photographs. There's a grid. There's a search grid. Yep. All the bones have been laid out, photographed, categorized. What is the first thing that they did on discovery of the burn pit? They called the coroner, they called a forensic anthropologist. All the things that didn't take place here. So we are justified. And so, Duke, you are so justified in being so harsh and critical with the way the state, the way they processed that burn pit. They made so many mistakes. It's shocking. Really
from beginning to end. From beginning to end.
Mm-hmm. They're still making mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of excuses that we are supposed to believe, if you believe, the state's theory and their narrative that they presented, it's almost laughable when you take a step back. You know, we're supposed to believe that a German Shepherd named Bear stopped any sort of investigation to the burn pit for multiple days. You know, a dog, you know, was able to stop law enforcement and say like, whoa, there's a dog there, guys, and it looks a little aggressive. So I say we just like don't go even near that area for at least 3 days.
And yet the irony
is they did.
Is they removed him from the burn pit on November the 8th.
Well, and they kept him fed with good water and
and they probably patted him too. Yeah.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, it's so that part's laughable, and then we're supposed to believe that, well, you know, it wasn't super meticulous that day because our priority was we weren't sure if these were human or animal bones, and it was our duty, you know, the best interest for everyone involved to just, you know, let's get these things collected before it gets dark and get them to someone who can tell us if it's human or animal. I mean, come on, that's not how investigations work.
No, but the counter argument of this is what happened on November the 7th at Cuss Road. Okay. No matter what state advocate says, no matter what Kratz and his cronies say, there's a counter argument to destroy their argument. The way they treated Cuss Road was a full-on crime scene with the amount of crime scene tape, the amount of investigators that were there, the amount of resources that were there, the fact that there was an aeroplane flying above that took copious photographs, the mere fact that they were there all day, including bringing lights and illuminating the entire area, all for, wait for it, a peat moss bag and a rotting wooden pallet. This is an area in which both two different types of canines gave alerts, a bloodhound and a human remains detection dog, one that detects human decomposition. According to the state, nothing occurred there. Now, if they put in all that time, energy, and resources for a peat moss bag and a crate, rotting wooden pallet, look at the way they handled the burn pit on Stephen's property 20 yards from his back door, and they're looking for Teresa Hallbach.
Well, so Doc, so they treated Cuss Road that way, like you described, based on what they thought could potentially be something. And correct. Then the next day, when they thought the bones could potentially be human, they did the exact opposite.
100% opposite. Nothing. And mind you, on finding bones in a burn pit, and remember what Sturtevant said, oh my God, I saw cranial bones. Cranial bones. You would think, guys, what we need to do is stop, call the boss, get him over here, let's get a coroner, let's get a forensic anthropologist, because A, have we just found Teresa Hallbach, the missing victim, or are we simply gathering bones from discarded barbecue chops and other bits and pieces, because we're going to look like a bunch of idiots if we sift all these bones and a forensic anthropologist says, guys, you've just isolated some pig bones and some sheep bones. Congratulations.
Right.
None of it occurred.
Yeah, well, you know what would have helped them too is the fact that they had, I don't know, over a handful of cadaver dogs that were being utilized in this case. You know, if they found those bones, don't you think one of them would have thought logically, hey, I know we want to determine, you know, scientifically if these are human or animal, but we've got these cadaver dogs that can detect human remains. Maybe we should run one of them by this burn pit.
It's the most insane thing you will ever hear. And it just does my head in. Think about it. Bear.
And-
Now, the argument is that Bear was an issue. However, they removed Bear and they shifted Bear on November the 8th because they were obviously digging and processing the burn pit. And Duke, you hit the nail on the head. Okay, before we commit to any type of digging, before we commit to any type of processing, get on the blower, get one of the canine dogs over here, human remains detection dog, let him check the area, let him check the perimeter. Is the dog alerting? Is the dog barking? Is there any? Remember, because the dog works with a trainer, and Loof is a human. It is the bloodhound, right? But you bring in Brutus, who's a human remains detection dog. Now you know that Brutus has got a 100% strike rate, right? Is a very, very experienced dog. Why don't you bring him in? Put him on a leash, get him to do a tour of the burn pit. Is the dog showing any activity? Is the dog showing any alert? If the dog is showing some alert, hey, eureka, guys, we found human remains. Let's shut it down. Get a coroner, get a forensic anthropologist. Did they do any of that, Duke?
No, they didn't do any of it. And you know, it's
zero.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I want to, sorry, Jay, again, I don't know if we can zoom into this or not, but this is one of the new directions that, you know, I was taking when I thought about, because again, looking at Sturdivant leaving the property with this tarp that has, you know, had BZ in it. One, it breaks any sort of chain of custody that exists. But two, I just thought, like, well, where did they go? You know, I remember hearing on the radio traffic that night that there was evidence that Ertl was uncomfortable collecting. I found that interesting because this is the only piece of evidence that Ertl didn't turn over himself. So I think they're talking about, in my opinion, something that was collected into that tarp. And for people like myself, who for a long time had no idea about what this document is showing, it's another avenue that we need to consider, because again, at the end of the day, I would love to say for certain, here's where item BZ came from. I can't do that. No one can, apart from probably Kratz. He probably knows. But other than that, you know, there aren't many people that do. And so this is a report from the DCI that for years, Jack, right, we were not allowed to have.
Yep.
We had certainly requested it, but it's just something that wasn't provided to us. I think actually it was. The interesting thing is they said they provided it to us, but we double checked like the report number and everything. We learned that it wasn't what they told us.
Hey,
it wasn't that report.
If you know which report number it is, I can certainly make a larger version.
I think it is. I want to say it's 191, but let's see. I think it's 191.
Okay. While you guys are talking, I'll look.
But while you're let's see here. Yeah, while you're trying to pull it, I can read the report. So, you know, why am I mentioning this report? Because I wanted to know when Sturdivant and Strauss left the property for 18 minutes, then came back, then turned into tarp, if they were doing something that they shouldn't have been doing, and in my opinion, maybe adding something to the tarp or maybe changing which tarp was collected, whatever it might be, this report I think is relevant because I didn't really know too much about. And Doc, did you know that there was a pretty large sifting that was going on at Mitchell's Quarry on the morning of November 8th?
Yeah, I know that there were at Mitchell's Quarry. I know that there were canine activity, and there were hits. and that Erdl was there, and he found blood as well as tissue that were sent to Culhane, and she said they were of non-human origin. And I know that Erdl did a lot of digging at Mickle's Quarry. Yep. Very interesting.
And so that
Yeah,
was
it's not 191, Duke. I'm gonna look at 190.
Yeah. So that was on the 6th where they had all those dog hits, and then Earl went out and everything. I didn't really know about the 8th too much. And so in this report it says on Tuesday, November 8th, 2005, Special Agent Tom Fassbender asked Special Agent Lisa Wilson to search a specific area in the quarry located east of Avery Road. And we know that to be Mitchell's Materials, correct?
Mickles. Yep, Mickles.
Yep. It says Fassbender said that this area was marked with crime scene tape and had a pile of gravel on a tarp and should be sifted through in great detail, as the dog had indicated on the spot. I mean, you'd think and you'd hope that they're talking about his burn pit, but we're talking about in Mitchell's Quarry.
Yep. That, before you go on,
Yeah.
and you, I think you back me up on this. There was a lot of confusion about all the areas around the Avery salvage yard, and I believe it was done deliberately so that you couldn't really follow what area that they were looking at. In fact, one of the reports, they actually had made a mistake. You thought they were talking about the Manitowoc County gravel pit, but in actual fact, they were talking about Mickle's Quarry, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why when they talk about west to the property, east to the property, south to the property, here they're definitely talking about Mickle's Quarry. And that's the area, I think, Duke, is that correct? 60 troopers went down there.
Yep.
60.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it was an area, and you're the one that found the fact that they had a backhoe go down there.
Yep, they did.
Yeah.
Yep. A backhoe.
Doc, would you mind reading the document starting at the Special Agent Wilson?
Yeah, you want me to read the whole lot?
Yeah, it's just this page. So.
Yep. You want me to start from the top?
Start at Special Agent Wilson.
Yep. S.A. Wilson walked to the area and met with Calumet County Sheriff's Department Deputy Mary Nicolaus, who was standing by the spot to search. Also there was Manitowoc County Highway Department heavy machine operator Kevin Resch, who was there with a large excavator. S.A. Wilson noted that the spot to be searched was at the base of a large gravel sand mount, and that it looked like a scoop of gravel had been taken from the base and placed on a blue tarp at the base. There was crime scene tape on the mound around the scoop area. S.A. Wilson explained to Deputy Nicolaus and Mr. Resch that the dog had indicated on the area and that it had to be sifted through in detail. S.A. Wilson, Deputy Nicolaus, and Mr. Resch began by slowly sifting through the pile of gravel on the blue tarp. The gravel was wet and sandy. Deputy Nicolaus and S.A. Wilson found a couple of strands of what was believed to be dog hair. Deputy Nicolaus also found a small piece of what looked like either paper or plastic, a piece of black metal that looks like a fishing tackle swivel, and several small dark pieces of what looks like wood. Deputy Nicolaus and S.A. Wilson and Mr. Resch also seized several possible items of interest, which, once dried, were recognizable as small rocks. S.A. Wilson retained these small rocks, though they were no longer of interest once they were recognized for what they were. These items were placed in Ziploc bags. S.A. Wilson later assigned these items to DCI property receipt D7713 as follows. Do you want me to read what they are?
Yeah, you don't have to read the numbers, just the...
Okay. 2 strands of suspected dog hair, 1 piece of either paper or plastic, 1 piece of black metal that looks like fishing tackle swivel, several dark pieces of what looks like wood, several small rocks contained in 2 Ziploc bags. Upon sifting through the pile on the tarp, we cleared off the tarp, and S.A. Wilson had Mr. Resch use his excavator to take another small scoop from the base of the gravel pile marked by the crime scene tape. S.A. Wilson, Deputy Nicolaus, and Mr. Resch sifted through this scoop and located nothing. S.A. Wilson and Mr. Resch take 2 more scoops, and these were sifted through and nothing was located. S.A. Wilson and Mr. Resch used his excavator to skim gravel from the base area several times as S.A. Wilson scanned the skimmed area. S.A. Wilson did not collect anything. S.A. Wilson concluded the search of this area and had Mr. Resch return the displaced gravel to the base of the mound. S.A. Wilson later obtained an aerial photograph of the Avery property from SAC Peter Thelen. S.A. Wilson had this photograph scanned and used a computer paint program to draw a marker into the scanned image to indicate the area search. S.A. Wilson drew a yellow line coming in from the right side of the image, with the end of the line indicating the search area in the quarry. S.A. Wilson also labelled Avery Road and Highway 147 on the image.
And then, Jack, is the image below? I don't know if it's actually in the document or not. I think it should be the next page.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
And a little further. There it is.
Yep, there it is there.
So that can. Thank you, Doc, for reading that.
No, has
and the image confirms obviously what we were saying before of where this took place.
Yeah.
So why did I want to read through that? One, I had never heard of such a labor-intensive search going on at Mitchell's on November the 8th, which is a very significant day. The timing of it can't be ignored. That you've got this massive excavation and sifting process happening over at this quarry the same day where allegedly, the bones are found at the burn pit. That you cannot ignore the convenience of that timing. But what makes it worse is that we've never heard about it, which is interesting. Because I feel like we all know Ken Kratz well enough now to know that the things that he doesn't say likely and most times mean much more than the things that he does say. But two, we have, for the first time, I think there's probably other instances of it too, but a good example of evidence that was collected, right? They gave a pretty detailed list. And, I'm not going to sit here and speculate, but when they said, dark pieces that looked like wood, when you have burnt bones and things like that,
yeah,
you have dark pieces that look like wood or rocks.
Yeah, yes. In actual fact, if you have a look at item BZ, there are some small pieces that look like wood.
They do.
There certainly is. And the AI sources that I've used to help me analyze the pictures of item BZ have all said, looks like there's some fragments of wood in there.
Correct. In actual fact, the orthodontist said that when they were looking at the recovered items from the burn pit, some of them said that they looked like teeth, but in actual fact turned out to be wood, right? So that's why you need someone who knows how to look at bones to determine what they really, really are, and not that they're pieces of wood, etc., etc.
So look at this. I mean, several small dark pieces of what looks like wood. And then, several rocks, 2 Ziploc bags containing. So this is it. This is right here what I want to show you. This is evidence that's collected, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And
That's
it's
right.
evidence, although you could look at it and say there's nothing about this that correlates, to Teresa Halbach or whatever. This is evidence that was collected during the Teresa Halbach investigation, during in which any other piece of evidence that was collected was logged eventually where? In Calumet County Sheriff's Office, correct? Because they're handling the investigation.
Correct.
Yes.
Where are these items in Calumet County Sheriff's Department's list of evidence?
I think they're in Madison. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah,
I
so
think they're in Madison, but go ahead.
So I think they ended up there. The interesting thing is, and I'm trying to figure out exactly where I can get the document at some point, but these pieces of evidence were never given to Calumet County. Calumet County never reported having these items, never documented them as or designated them property tag numbers or anything.
Right.
But in, I think, 2011, maybe, they were then from DCI given to Calumet County for, I think, the first time, which is a little bizarre. But the key point I want to pull out here is that there's evidence that was
Shuffled around.
Yeah. I mean, it's I've never heard of these things before.
Yeah, there's if you go on deeper into the version of the DCI reports that we got last year, you'll see, especially towards the end, Lisa Wilson, Lisa Wilson had several things still in her credenza in 2012 that didn't get shipped off to. I can't remember. I may have said that wrong. I said Madison. I think it's Appleton, if I'm remembering right. I know some things she pulled some things out and got sent. I'm almost positive now that it was Appleton for long-term storage or whatever. Why would she still have things in her desk in 2012? I mean,
right. So here's a good comparison and kind of like, how does this relate back to the case and how does it relate to item BZ? So keep in mind, item BZ, like I've told you before, it was found not on the 8th, it was found on the 10th inside of a tarp full of debris that Pevito and Sturdivant sifted through together at the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yep.
The 10th,
yes.
morning. They opened up the tarp and they meticulously sifted through using, again, likely their hands, sifting screens to find anything of significance. That's where item BZ was first found, along with a lot of other bones that were apparently missed, as well as, well, I should say, I think there's two more searches of that tarp. One on the 10th that finds BZ. It's the most notable thing found on the 10th is that tissue. They said they go through it all with their hands and find anything that's of value. But allegedly that same tarp full of debris was then searched again on December 19th, this time at the Madison State Crime Lab. And upon that search is where we have another significant find, which is the infamous Daisy Dukes rivet.
Oh, the rivets. Yeah.
The rivets.
So this tarp is it's almost like Santa's gift sack.
The gift that keeps on giving.
He unloads one place and then it magically it reloads up by itself to deliver more gifts to someone else. It's that in of itself is kind of unbelievable. But the point I'm trying to make is that, the tarp full of debris, what makes more sense? We've seen, documented it earlier, Steve and Avery's burn pit was about the size of a table,
Yep.
And the sifting that they did on the 8th was they didn't dig at all. They used their shovels like dustpans. They just scooped all the loose ash. Again, didn't dig into that hard dirt. They just scooped the loose ash,
Yep.
put it on the sifting screens, Anything that fell through onto the tarp. With that space and that process, again, not digging, but just collecting the loose ash, which tarp do you think would have such a significant amount of debris inside that it would produce so many different items of evidence in future searches of it? Would it be just the loose ash that was in Stephen Avery's burn pit? Or would it be a tarp that was full of debris that was lifted by some sort of heavy machine or excavator that was placed onto the tarp and then collected? I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, I know where you're going with this, right? When you look at the so-called sifting at the burn pit, at Stephen Avery's burn pit, if you're finding all those items, you have to ask the question, did they actually do any sifting at all? Did they actually use the sifting screen? Because there's no form of distinguishment, right? There's no form of sifting. If you're finding very large items like the large muscle tissue, if you're finding a very large bone fragment, if you're finding all these rivets and other items, you have to ask yourself, hey, did they actually do any sifting, right? So I know where you're going with the Mikkels quarry. You're going, okay, could this material have actually come from Mikkels quarry, right? Where they're using a large excavator to move sand and other type of debris, right? So if they use sifters at Stephen Avery's burn pit, right, Ertl set up his sifting screen, none of that large material would have gone through the screens. It would have been on the screen, picked up and placed directly in a box. Would you agree?
100%.
There is no flipping way that having set up sifting screens, that they placed the ash from the burn pit on the sifting screens. And I think they had multiple screens to catch the material as it fell through. Those larger fragments. And remember what Ertl said. Ertl said during the trial, the other guy said to me, is this a bone?
Yep.
And I said, if it looks like a bone or you're not sure, place it in the box. And Bennett looked at all the contents of the box. There was no item BZ in that box. That is damning.
Yeah.
That's damning.
How many rivets did they find on the 19th? Well, number one, it's a little strange that Dettering and nor Pevito found a rivet on the 10th, but if they were going through, a rivet, I'm sure they were dirty and whatnot, but still round in appearance, got the little nipple on it or whatever, flat spots.
Yep.
Copper in color. But they didn't find any of them on the 10th. Do you remember how many they found on the 19th?
It had to have been over, I think it was maybe around 5, 6, could have been more.
Sounds right.
I mean, it was a handful. And again, we talk about the likelihood of these situations happening, the likelihood that they miss all the rivets on one day and find all of them the next is hard to believe.
Yeah.
It goes to show, Duke, sorry for cutting in, the incompleteness of this sifting process and the processing of the forensic evidence, how it's like a piecemeal approach. Oh, this day we found this. Oh, several days later we found this. Oh, in another week's time, guess what? We found this. So it really stretches credibility of how this burn pit, which is only small, and there are a lot of people involved in that sifting process, how everyone sort of missed all these particular items from the burn pit. It honestly makes no sense at all. No.
And so you're right, Doc. It doesn't make sense. It's so highly unlikely that, the things that happened, the way they happened actually did. What's much more likely and where, we talk about Occam's razor theory, What is the common sense, approach here? What is the most basic way to come to this conclusion of how this all happened? Well, the easiest way to explain it is simply this. Ken Kratz, or whoever was really leading the charge in this investigation, did it backwards, where they would find evidence and then create a narrative to support that evidence. They would create kind of what they wanted. Again, we talk about the lack of chain of custody, the lack of in situ photos of any remains. Well, that's real simple to explain. The goal here was to collect as much of the remains as possible and then create the narrative. If you document things properly, that documentation is going to create the narrative for you. If you collect it without any photos, you're allowed to create that narrative yourself.
That's correct. That's 100% correct. And I agree totally. I remember when I researched all this many, many years ago, the investigators were doing a retrospective narrative construction, right? Because you don't have proper crime scene documentation, photographs, you can put any narrative together that you want. And that's why Mr. Kratz avoided, like the plague, the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Remember during the trial, he said, I'm going to spend 20 seconds on this. Why? Because he couldn't explain it. Why? Why not touch Mickle's Quarry? Why not touch Cuss Road? Because it complicated the narrative. It meant that the crime scene was not small, not confined to Stephen Avery's burn pit, but actually very expansive. And you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what the hell is Stephen doing there, and everywhere? It made no sense, right? So because you don't have proper crime scene documentation, it's a trust me, bro. Oh, we found this in this tub. Oh, we found this at this time. We believe everything came from Stephen's burn pit. But where's your proof? I don't have any.
Right. Well,
and there goes, sorry, Duke, my final comment. There goes the very reason why they didn't want Deborah Kakich on the property. Eyes on the burn pit, eyes at Cuss Road, eyes at Mitchell Quarry. Why? Because she would tell it as it is. That's why you've got no coroner there, no proper crime scene documentation. It is a shit show. Absolutely disgusting when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, you talk about disgusting. Look at how the remains were handled after the case here. The state documents that they give the remains back to the Hall box, right? Well, we know that they gave them to the funeral home, but the intent here was to give Teresa's remains back to the family. A gesture from
allegedly they gave them to the funeral home, but no one from the funeral home signed the ledger.
Right. Again, it's this act of theirs that from a 30,000-foot view, it seems like a sympathetic gesture to provide the family with their daughter's remains for, a final burial and everything like that. And that's, if you were to look at it just from that perspective, that's great. However, one, it was illegal. They shouldn't have been able to do it. Two, when Zellner busted, and by busted I mean a guy left a voicemail basically that busted him.
That was Williams. I've got that voicemail.
But when she found out and brought this issue to the courts, you know what the state had to say? They had to argue, we don't know if those are human bones or not that we returned.
That's correct.
Are you kidding me?
Correct. What you find, and also people in chat will back me up on this, who follow other cases, the crap that comes out of attorneys' mouths and judges' mouths because they use an illegal argument to counteract what is obvious to everybody. And that is, wait a minute, you didn't have a forensic anthropologist look at these Ziploc bags that were handled. Now, wait for it. I think Tom Fallon was there. There were a couple of other guys there. You didn't have a forensic anthropologist to say, see that bone you're giving back to the family. That's a human bone. They had no forensic anthropologists there. They were guided by a report. They picked up all these bones from the Ziploc bags, which they thought were human, and then they gave it to the funeral home, which in turn, I believe, gave it to the Hallbach family. Yeah. So the argument that the state is saying is this: well, those guys that picked the bones out, they weren't forensic anthropologists. Hence, you can't actually say they gave back human bones to the family to bury, to say that's your daughter. Right. Have you ever heard anything so bizarre, so ridiculous, yet there it is?
Yeah, never. And to take it one step further, Doc, you're right. They had to basically determine themselves what they believed were human. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but part of that list of the ones that they believed were Teresa's included 8675, the bones that during the trial they vehemently argued were not human.
and yet I remember my jaw dropped, and same with Jack 61, when in convicting a murderer, what did they show at the Manitowoc County gravel pit? Human remains.
Yeah, they said, now we know. Now we know.
Now we know that the state is saying, shit, those bones at the Manitowoc County gravel pit, they were actually deemed human. And yet the argument was, wait a minute, Dr. Eisenberg, those bones, including cut, burnt hip bones at the Manitowoc County gravel pit, are they human? They're suspect, possible human. Suspect, possible human, right? And so Kratz argued, well, the smartest woman in the world doesn't know what they are, so hence we can't call them human. On convicting a murderer, what do we see in red glowing lights? Human remains. And what did Kratz blame? What did the judge blame? Oh, you can't say that Stephen didn't go down there and throw the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And you think to yourself, oh my God, these guys have now just admitted that part of Teresa Hallbach is now in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Remember, Brutus hit on the concrete pile. Remember those concrete slabs?
And dug.
And dug.
I was digging at the site.
He's digging at the site, and they brought him on an ATV directly to the Manitowoc County gravel pit. They didn't want the dog going anywhere else. They brought him directly there. What did the dog do? Alert and start digging.
Right. Isn't that
on the
concrete pile? The same investigators, same investigation that said it's not worth bringing the dog to the burn pit, said it's worth getting the dog on an ATV to get out to Manitowoc County gravel pit as soon as possible.
And the dog hit. The dog alerted.
Well, they use the dogs so often throughout. If you look and read the case, you'll read that there was several times where there was a hit, and so they would dig and they would recover what they felt like was, whatever the dog was hitting on, and then to emphasize how much they trusted the dogs, once they were finished, they would bring the dogs back and say, let's see if they hit, to see if we got it all. So to say the dogs weren't of some form of service to them once it came to the burn pit is, how would I put it? Stupid.
It's an oxymoron state. They use the dogs everywhere but the burn pit.
Yep.
They brought the dogs everywhere, all around the Avery salvage yard, including on the Avery salvage yard, but the burn pit itself was a non-go zone for the HRD canines, human remain detection canines. You have to ask the question, why? You know why? Because they were terrified of no hits at the burn pit. Yes. You understand?
Yep.
If all these canines, and Brutus was 100% accurate, he alerted at every spot he alerted, they found a source, either blood or bone. So he had 100% hit rate. They were terrified that if they brought the dogs to the burn pit and the dogs are going, there's nothing to see here, guys. There's nothing here. Then their narrative is destroyed. Do you understand? So that box of bones, you start going, oh yeah, when were those bones actually introduced? Were they actually found in this location? Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting that they would use the dogs everywhere else except the main burn pit area.
Right.
Fascinating, isn't it?
And their excuse is that, again, bear, and that they didn't know if the bones that they had found on the 8th were human or animal, and so they wanted to get them out there. But isn't it interesting that on November 9th, those bones are confirmed to be human, correct? And then on November 10th,
Yes.
Bennett analyzed them on the 9th and says that they're human. So the investigation certainly knows that those were human bones found in Stevens burn pit on November 9th. They know that. And on November 10th, we have Brutus continuing to do searches everywhere else but a confirmed location that apparently had human bones in it.
Well, here is the ridiculous thing. When Pevito and his team came back, they never bought a dog. What did they do? They got on their hands and knees and checked all the grass. Remember, They started at the dog kennel and worked their way back.
And they smiled for some pictures.
And they smiled for some pictures. And you think to yourself, guys, there's no bear there. Bring in a dog, because did Stephen bury some of Teresa Hallbach's cremains underground? Remember what Brendan Dassey later said? That Stephen allegedly buried some of the bones right at the burn pit.
Dug a bunch of holes.
Right? Of course, they found nothing. Why not bring in the dog just to check the perimeter to see if there are any further human cremains? And
I agree.
Not only that, remember the bone that Sergeant Jason Jost found in the grass with Sturtevant?
Yep.
They never collected it.
Never collected it.
They never collected it. The one that said it looked like spinal cord, they never collected it. They asked Erdl. They said, when you did the sifting, what did you do? What was your boundary of sifting? Just the burn pit. Did you collect anything in the grass? No. No.
And didn't photograph it.
And did not photograph it.
No, it's that point alone is enough for me, and I think for most of us, to realize that something's wrong here. We have thousands, and I'm not kidding you, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of photos that were taken of things how they were in situ at the Avery property. We have thousands of them. There was definitely an emphasis and obviously a very clear understanding from these investigators that documentation and taking in situ photos was important. It was. This is not the 1950s, and even then there probably would have been photos taken. But we have thousands of examples of random and insignificant photos that were taken of things in situ that turned out to be nothing. And to believe that there are zero photos of any, I should say that there are zero photos of any of Teresa's remains, how they were found and where they were found. We have zero.
Well,
to think that was an accident is beyond comprehension. It is intentional, and it is the only reason why Ken Kratz and others were able to basically tell people like Eisenberg and Culhane and the jury, the judge, where these bones were found. It allowed them to create that narrative because they purposely did not want any sort of factual chain of custody to tell the narrative for them. Why is that?
Well, 100% agree. What doesn't make any sense, and I'm going to bring up a good friend, Sergeant Jason Jost, right? Now, Sergeant Jason Jost was everywhere where the human remains detection canines were, Remember the documents that I found, the police reports? I had no idea that he was even involved. No one even mentioned Sergeant Jason Jost. But he was in the Manitowoc County gravel pit with the dogs. He was in Redon's quarry with the dogs. They had teams of dogs absolutely everywhere. Where the dogs were, Sergeant Jason Jost was. Now, to emphasize your point, Sergeant Jason Jost made a very important point about the burn pit. Remember what he said? He goes, guys, I think we need to look at the burn pit.
Yep.
I found
I put it all
together. Yeah.
He put it all together. And that involved Redon observing the fire in Stephen Avery's burn pit. So Redon see how they tied it all in. The key central person that worked it all out is Sergeant Jason Jost. He's the one that told Mignon, told Sturdivant, told everyone, told Sipple, I think we better look at that burn pit.
Yep.
And guess what? Despite the warning, despite the Nostradamus moment, did they take any pictures of the burn pit?
No.
Did they
Not that we know
of the burn pit?
Nope.
Did they call the bosses? Did they call the investigators? Did they call Hagel? Nothing.
No, not that we're aware of. No.
Well, I think there is a report that says that. I think there is a report that says that Strauss is on the phone with Fassbender while she was at the burn pit. But apparently, whatever that conversation wasn't enough to prompt Fassbender to come up and check it out himself.
Well, you would think that Fassbender would show up.
Well, hell yeah. He showed up for a piece of plastic sticking out of the ground and shut the whole area down.
But as Jack 61 eloquently pointed out, I remember ages ago when he played the phone calls, I was shocked that Sergeant Jason Jost, A, did not want to write a report, B, didn't want anything to do with the finding of the bones. And remember, they asked him, Sipple, I think it was Sipple, oh, so you are the one that found it.
Oh, no, that was his boss. That was Shedder, Greg Shedder, his boss.
Shedder. And he then goes, I better talk to Sipple and get some times just to make sure that all my reports. It is remarkable that the guy responsible for pointing at the burn pit, to the finding of Teresa's cremains, to the breakthrough of the case, A, didn't want to write a report, and B, didn't want anything to do with the burn pit.
And C, he wasn't promoted to detective.
Correct.
And D, he wasn't called during the trial. They had everyone else that found him
during the trial.
Yeah, they didn't want him anywhere near that courtroom.
They did not want him on the stand. It is bizarre.
No. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap up my portion of side. We got other stuff to get to, and I don't want to. I could talk about this probably till for the next 12 hours, and I'd still have plenty of time. There's so many different avenues here that we could touch on. The most important one is this: a case, and for people that are following the Karen Reed case, there was testimony a few days ago. I can't remember. It might have been a week ago, where the defense attorney was drilling into this deputy, whatever his name is, Bukakic or whatever.
Buchanan.
Yeah, Buchanan, whatever excuse of a man was up there. It was pathetic to see, in my opinion. But the defense was drilling into him about one thing that is so crucial in these types of investigations, and that's chain of custody. And what he was doing was so strategic and so powerful, because it's highlighting to the jury, hey, the evidence that is being used against my client is evidence that they're saying came from here. But I'm showing you they can't prove it came from there. And that's their job. I hear from state advocates all the time, and what they'll tell me is they'll say, Duke, you can't prove that item BZ was planted. And I'll say, you're right. But that's not the concern. The concern is you can't prove that BZ was in
Origin.
content.
The origin.
That is horrific to
Yep, the
believe
origin.
the state and to believe their narrative that convicted an innocent man for the second time and a poor 16-year-old kid
Nephew.
who they just threw away with him off of evidence that you can't prove was there is disgusting. And they should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of investigative issues, just like in the Delphi case, just like in this case. There are significant issues, and there are probably 2 or 3 of them to me that they automatically tell you reasonable doubt, period. I mean, to me. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's why I've actually now taken a personal interest in the Delphi case. Why? Because it's so parallel to what happened with Stephen and Brendan. And I can see the Delphi case going very much along the same parallel lines as what we're discussing now, but in years to come. And I've been spending a lot of time on that case, and I'm horrified with what happened in terms of the judge, the way the judge manipulated the defense, the way the judge actually kicked out the defense, and how the crime scene handling and documentation in that double murder case was horrendous. And people having a feeling and a hunch, well, this guy's got to be guilty because of, I think, A, B, C, D. And then when we go back to the Avery and Dassey case and we look at the handling of the forensic evidence, it is shocking. But I'll tell you what, had Stephen and Brendan had the same attorneys that Karen Reed has got now,
oh God,
they would have destroyed the state from top to bottom. Every expert that the state put on the stand would have cried and run out of the courtroom because these guys are so thorough, so meticulous.
They're relentless.
They are, even I'm sweating and I'm just watching these guys.
Yeah,
the level of detail, Jack 61, is meticulous. They would have destroyed Eisenberg. They would have destroyed Culhane to pieces.
Oh, absolutely.
I think, I really think technology becoming more available for everyone, where the government isn't the only one with access to the latest and greatest, is really going to benefit criminal defense attorneys going forward, because the playing field has evened back up, right? I think Stephen and Brendan were convicted at a time where the state was financially out, just in a whole other realm from, we know Buting and Strain from the beginning discussed money issues. Like, and Stephen gave them how much money to defend him?
$240,000.
Yeah.
So and the state spent roughly 10 times more than that.
Yeah. So $250,000, and they didn't have the resources available to do the job they knew they needed to do for their client from jump.
Correct.
So, and that's because they didn't have manpower, and plus the time constraints as well.
Well, experts are expensive. You got to fly them in, you got to pay them, put them up in the hotel and all that stuff. It's expensive.
And you just didn't have as large of a pool of people who know that the state doesn't always get it right like you do now. Now you have expert witnesses. You have a large pool of them who are willing to it's not jeopardizing your reputation anymore. It's okay to be to not align with what the state says. You're not going to be blackballed. You're not going to
No.
be blacklisted. You're not going to be canceled. You don't have to worry in depth. And another thing that I think is huge is the cameras, like people documenting everything. Social media, you've seen that a lot in the Young Thug case. If that case had not been on social media from the beginning, I don't know if the outcome would have been the same, because they were playing really slimy in that case as well. And they're still playing slimy, really. I mean, you don't hear about it as much.
A lot of people, in the public, were pretty relentless themselves, and some of the things they found, kind of like, Turtle Boy. He was pretty damn relentless in this case, and the stuff that he found and dug up and exposed.
But that's what you need, Jack 61.
Absolutely.
Turtle Boy, you think about it. Kathleen Zellner was the Turtle Boy equivalent. Someone that dug in deep, someone that looked through all the minutiae and said, okay, can we reconstruct this? Can we redo this? That's what Turtle Boy was doing too. I remember I saw a video clip of him with his car. He got a car and he went out with a friend, and they were documenting the reversing, how fast the car reversed. And he was in front of the Albert's home, right? And all the neighbors were coming out looking at him going, what the hell is this guy doing? And he was trying to reproduce what the state said that Karen Read did. And that's why you need to try to reproduce the crime. Can you debunk it? Can you reproduce it?
I'm just thinking about that. It was snowing the night they're claiming she hit him with her car, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I've never been knocked over by a car in the snow, but I would think that the snow would be a much more, I don't want to say much more, but it would be actually a better cushion to land on than concrete, paved road, all the things. I mean, you still have centrifugal force and the whiplash issue. Did he have a spinal cord injury? Have they discussed that?
No, I don't think he did. No, he had head trauma to the back of his head and the side of his head. He had
no broken bones in the arm.
No,
nothing.
What was the actual cause of death in that case? Because I don't know a lot about it.
The medical examiner won't say.
What?
That's right.
Undetermined, right?
Undetermined. Yep. Undetermined. But he's got pretty significant trauma to his head. His right arm it's definitely a dog attack. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. He's bit and scratched all the hell on his right arm. He's got some injury, I think, to his stomach area, but it's not nothing like what's on his arm. Another problem that you run into with in the Reed case, and then we're going to move on. If he was outside for basically 5.5 hours, it was 18 degrees and the wind was blowing. And I'm going to tell you, for those that don't understand, it's cold and the wind will really cut right through you. I can understand if his feet weren't really damaged by frost and freezing, but his hands would have been. He would have had significant frostbite on his hands, significant, yes. and probably his arms, but definitely his hands.
There's a lot of problems with that case.
Yeah.
Okay, we can't do it justice in a podcast like this. If you're going to do it properly, it's going to take you a month.
How long to die in cold?
Yeah.
How long to die in cold? 227.
So what's the so has anyone tried to do an open records request for the autopsy and all that? Like, what's the policy for Massachusetts?
I haven't. Turtle Boy probably has, but I don't know.
I'm sure they have. I think, yeah, people have it, I think. I mean, they just talked about it in court the other day, too. They went through it.
So it's part of the record now.
Yeah, they went through like the actual autopsy and what was found, what wasn't found, and
Yeah, medical examiner was on.
Yeah.
Was testifying. Anyway, let's get back to the rally, Brendan and Stephen. And I do want to say before Doc, you want to go or you want me to go?
You want me to go next?
It doesn't matter to me. You let me know and I'll get your stuff loaded.
Yep. Jack, you can go. I don't mind going last.
Okay.
I'm not presenting. I'm commentating.
Okay.
Awesome.
Is that good?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Okay. And hello to everyone in chat. Hello, Jack. Hello, Dr. Silkman. Hello, Duke.
Welcome.
Welcome. I did want to say hello to Barb. She's in the live chat.
Yes.
And I also want to thank Lisa. She's got Jerry Buting. They're listening to us. I guess where they're at there in Manitowoc or wherever they're meeting at there. I'm not exactly sure, but wanted to say hello to them. A big shout out.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to talk about is a couple of different things. I'm not going to go quite as in depth, but these are just a couple of things. There are many more, like guys. I just picked a few things that really bother me. What I'm going to say is my opinion. I'm not saying anyone at Foul Play endorses what I'm going to say. Because I've talked to them about it in the past, but it's not been a big powwow. Says, hey, all these people agree. This is what I've observed. And I'm gonna pick on first Candy Avery, because to me this directly affects Brendan. Okay, so we know that the middle of November 2005, Pagel sent investigator Wendy Baldwin after Marie to flip her. Now had already been an investigation into the Marie and Stephen thing, and it was closed months earlier. If they were going to charge him, they would have, right? They closed the case. That wasn't good enough. So now we have this big investigation. Let's go after him for something else too. Let's create a pattern, right? So anyway, Baldwin hounds the hell out of her, and she's not having anything. Marie's not having anything to do with it. This goes into January, and I just want to preface this because this is not going to. I'm not going to read these reports. They're readily available with the new DCI reports that we got. Between January of 2006 and June 2006, Candy Avery talked to the DCI at least 7 times. At least 7 times. And that's what we know of that was reported. And then there was all the contacts she had with Wiegert and Baldwin. My personal feeling is, and I'm just going to go through these, and I'm going to read the dates, and I'll get back to what I was going to say. This first one I'm going to show, I got these all lined up, by the way. This is from January 9th, 2006. This is the first one. Excuse me, I sneeze. The second one is from January 24th, 2006. And you can see that, well, I'm not going to get into all that because we'll be here all night. The third one is 2 days later on the 26th. That's number 3 that we're aware of. Number 4, we jump up about a month to the 28th. And I'm 99% sure this is when they went back and talked to Earl, Candy, and Kayla. Anyway, right before this, about a week, Kayla had made a report to the school counselors or somebody, and Wiegert and Fassbender went and questioned her. And there's a recording in Cam, I'm not going to play it, where she basically says that they called her a liar, wanted her to change her responses, etc., etc. That's a Cliff and Cam. I think Candy put her up to that because she recanted all of it. That's my personal feeling. She was trying anything and everything to get at Stephen. That's my personal feeling, my opinion, I guess. Moving on. Next date is April 21st. What happened on April 21st? That was the day that Barb's computer was seized. She had made a report about these text messages she allegedly found because they didn't take, well, I'm suspicious that I'm suspicious that that could have been Candy on the computer and not one of the kids or both the kids. I don't know that. It's just, because there's more than this. There are phone calls. I could have drugged them out and played them, but I'm not going to do that. They're available to listen to if anybody's interested. So April 21st, day that Barb's computer was seized. May 24th. And then the last one, June the 1st. So all of these, to me, all these contacts that we're aware of, I suspect there's many more that we're unaware of that didn't get reported or recorded or whatever. And, whatever. That's just my suspicion. Because of how everything kind of fell together, Brendan gets drug into it by his neck. All of a sudden, I say all of a sudden, they talked to Kayla on the 20th, but they didn't interview Brendan for a week. Well, if it was that really important that all this stuff happened, wouldn't you think that you would go immediately and talk to him? I mean, that's just me. I don't know. So that's just my suspicion. I can't prove any of it. I just see actions. And as I said, there are multiple phone calls where she's on the line. And anyway, that just adds to it. I'm not trying to be vague. I promise everyone that the phone calls are available, but there's very few of them that we've ever played publicly. And that's because Brendan didn't want them played and his lawyers didn't want them played. And I understand why. He was a child, lost out in the weeds, completely. I mean, can you imagine yourself as a 16-year-old not even being locked up? Would you want any of your phone calls played? I know I wouldn't. So that decision was made, and we stuck to it. That's not preventing anyone from getting the calls. I mean, that doesn't stop that at all. Anyway, I'm gonna leave that there. You guys can comment while I prepare for what I'm going to show next.
I think it's very significant, Candy's involvement and Candy's flipping, because remember, both Earl and Candy appeared on Convicting a Murderer, basically tearing shreds off Stephen. And it's pretty extraordinary that Convicting a Murderer would have someone like Earl casting aspersion on his own brother, considering the criminal past of Earl himself. The last person that you would want pointing a finger at his own brother is Earl himself. But I do agree with you, Jack. Candy's involvement was quintessential here because basically it involved destroying Stephen and his character. And that was very, very important. So flipping Candy, because she was a supporter initially who believed in Stephen's innocent, and then she totally flipped. And I think it was payback for his involvement with Marie.
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
Well, this is a common theme that the investigators were doing, right? They were looking for people that would turn against Stephen and help them in convicting Stephen and getting him back into prison. That's what they were looking for. They tried relentlessly with Jody. They tried relentlessly to get her to flip and to just have this hatred. Now, why are they doing that? It's because once they get them to that point where there is this mutual hatred. And when I say mutual, I know for a fact that the investigators and the people that were driving this investigation hated Stephen Avery. They hated him.
Yes.
And so once they got people on board to hate Stephen as well, those people became more useful to them to either provide statements, potential testimony, narratives that would help in this, again, formed narrative that they were creating. This was all very intentional.
Oh yeah, if you look at how they treated Jody, I mean, it started within 2 hours of them finding the RAV.
Mm-hmm.
Within 2 hours, they were in the jail talking to her.
Yeah.
And they were, I've got a list that I created about how many times they went after Jody, and I think it is around 22 times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
22 times, and she wasn't even there.
No. And you know, we've got a recording of them. You know, they've got her in an interview, and they're playing for her the calls between Stephen and what's her name? What's his jailhouse girlfriend name? That I can't think of it right now.
You talk about Jody's girlfriend?
No, I'm talking about the woman that.
Debbie Klemp.
Yes, thank you. They're playing for Jody, her and Stephen's calls. Why are they doing that? It doesn't have anything to do with the investigation of Teresa Hall. It is solely to get her frustrated with Stephen.
I think they set it up.
Well, yeah.
Debbie Klemp was a plant.
Yep. And if I could just cut in, and it's a good point that Duke made, and also Jack 61. If your evidence against Stephen is strong, if the evidence that you've gathered is so strong to prove that it's inculpatory, you don't need any of these peripheral issues. Would you guys agree?
100%.
Yep.
And Jack, go ahead, Doc.
This is the main beef that I have against convicting a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Convicting a murderer had the opportunity and chance to say, guys, we're going to show you how this crime occurred. We're going to show you how Stephen and Brendan together collectively murdered Teresa Hallbach. They did none of the sort. Their aim was to destroy Stephen's character completely, to make the viewers hate Stephen. So hence all the weaknesses that the state had against Stephen, they had nothing against Brendan, you would forget. So in other words, you got worked up so much that you hated Stephen so much that, of course, he had to have killed Teresa Hallbach. Agree? And that is exactly why the investigators got into the ears of Candy, of Earl, of all the brothers, the father, the mother, Barb. And Barb's in chat. You could ask Barb. They got into their ears. Why? Because they needed to convince the family that Stephen had committed this murder.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you think to yourself, if their evidence against Stephen was so strong, they don't need to convince anybody.
Nope.
It's the evidence, guys. The guy's guilty. No. They psychologically tortured and worked on all the family members. That's exactly what occurred against Richard Allen by trying to convince the wife, by trying to convince the daughter, your husband, your father killed these two girls. This is precisely what they did against Stephen. Convicting a murderer was a hate piece.
Yeah.
A hate piece.
Yep. Against Stephen, Brendan, and Ma'am.
Yep. Imagine if they turned their lens on Earl and looked at what he did. They would have destroyed Earl. Agree?
Oh boy.
Same with the other brother. They would have destroyed Chuck as well. They put their hands off them. That is disgusting that they allowed a brother who, I won't talk about what he did to children, but oh my God, they let him sit on a soapbox and spew vitriol against his own brother and support the police, the very people that the Avery and Dasseys hate. And here you are, you're watching Earl saying, oh yeah, come on, all these cops, they all lied, they all colluded. Earl, they're trying to put you in jail, mate.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Useless.
thing about another, we're talking about Earl. He did an interview. A lot of people don't know this. Maybe some listening that are new and don't know the case details. But Earl gave an interview on November 9 after he was taken for his buccal swab and finger and palm prints, and he was interviewed by the DCI. Okay, I asked for that recording. It was already out there, but I wanted our own copy, and I was sent a copy of 3 tapes. Each side is roughly 50 minutes long. Cassette tape A is fine; it's full. Cassette tape number 2, side A is got about 28 minutes of 50 on side A. Side B, and then it goes blank. Side B is blank. Tape 3 is completely redacted as well. I've tried twice to get an unredacted copy of that interview, and I was denied both times. I don't know why they give you that big lawyerly speech, but come on, it's just an interview. It's not like anyway. I've not been able to.
Was it entered as evidence?
Yeah, 3 tapes.
Have we ever distinguished if the copy we receive is different than the copy entered as evidence?
I've not done it side by side.
I wonder if this just came to me. So, what was her name? Barbara Pamprin? Is that her name? Who's the lady at the courthouse?
Well, the one the clerk at the courthouse is Barbara. In Manitowoc is Barbara
Pantarin. Yeah. I wonder if we were to request her copy, what you would get. I just thought about that. Like literally just came to me. I wonder if the copy would be different.
I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't remember I don't recall who got the original Earl Avery interview, but it's an hour and something. Or maybe a little over 2 hours. I can't remember exactly. I think it's a little over 2 hours. But there's 3 tapes. And
but there's really not 3 tapes if you've only got 1.5 of them.
Yeah, but
right?
what the DCI sent me was tape 1, side AB, tape 2, side AB, tape 3, side AB. And I'm like, there's nothing on what I explained to you all. Where the hell is it at? Well, it's been redacted. Well, I want an unredacted copy.
And how long is your tape?
I think with all 3 combined, it's 2 hours and 12 minutes or something like that. Like I said, tape 1 is fine. Tape 2, side A is about half cut on side A, and there's nothing on side B. Tape 3 is completely blank both sides.
Yeah, that doesn't.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I wonder if we should do a side-by-side comparison, and if there are definite, like if they aren't similar, if that would allow us.
Well, they should be exactly the same because the DCI controlled those recordings. They had possession.
I agree. But if they aren't, then would that be an avenue to then ask for another copy?
Well, it'd be a problem for them. I don't know what they would do.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
but
something to think about.
Yeah.
I was going to say, but from what the recordings that we've got, from what the reports that we've read, you could tell what the investigators were doing to the brothers. I'm not sure about what happened with Barb, but they were threatening them. And I remember with Chuck. Skorlinski kept on mentioning that missing girl, Dupre, from the 90s, and he kept on associating Chuck with this missing girl. Well, oh, do you know anything about such and such? And you're thinking, wait a minute, this is a murder investigation involving Teresa Horbach. Why is Skorlinski bringing up a murder case that happened a long time ago, right? So he's giving idle threats to Chuck. With Earl, remember what they said to him? Oh,
EPA.
So I hear that you're burning tires.
Yeah.
You realize that we can shut down the Avery salvage yard and fine you? So they're giving all these subtle threats that if you don't see the way we're seeing this investigation, you guys are going to be in a hell of a lot of trouble. I don't know if they threatened Barb, but apparently I remember Mama Avery saying, oh my God, they gave Bobby Dassey a real hard time. So
they arrested her.
Correct.
Yeah. So
yes,
there's a movie that Denzel plays in, Denzel Washington. It's one of the few where he plays the role of the bad guy. And he's a bad cop. What's the, y'all know, what is it? It's like something day. Training Day. Have y'all ever? Okay. Do you want to go to jail or you want to go home? You want to go to jail or you want to go home? That's all that is. That's all that is. And, you know, and there's a house divided cannot stand. Divided, you know, united we stand, divided we fall, divide and conquer. That's all it is.
That's exactly what they were doing. That's exactly what they were doing. When I read some of the interview, remember Jack 61, we played it, the interviews with the investigators and Jody, the questions, the private personal questions that they asked Jody. I'm thinking to myself, you're asking about her sex life with her fiance? You've got to be kidding. And then remember what we get said? Oh, so you support a killer, huh? You want Stephen Avery to be free? Imagine he'll go after your daughter. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? These guys have got no boundaries. They've got no limits. They've got no moral compass. They will use anything to their advantage. Fancy playing the phone calls of Debbie Clamp and the letters of Debbie Clamp with Stephen and handing them over to Jody. Why? Because they needed Jody to flip. They needed Jody to be so disgusted that she would abandon Stephen. That was their aim. Their aim was to put Stephen in a silo that everybody hated him.
But the thing of it is, honestly, Jody was never going to, there was nothing Jody could give them to serve Stephen up on a silver platter. The only thing they did by separating her from Stephen was isolate him. She was in jail. You know what I mean? Like, she was his alibi. That alibi wasn't going to change because it was a jail call. It was locked in.
Well, I personally have always thought that if given the chance, if she had opened up herself to it, they would have tried to work angles within that phone call for her to say things maybe like, yeah, it was odd. He did seem distracted, distressed. This wasn't normal. I don't know. I can't say, this is all speculation on my end, but I would think that that's one of the paths that they might have used is if just
they'd have put her on the stand. Yeah, that's true. That's true. They probably could have, because
those calls are damning for them. They're like, oh shoot, it doesn't sound like he's been killing anyone in these phone calls. No,
not at all. Not at all. And if there's one thing we know from the plethora of phone calls that we have, or the plethora of phone calls that we have, is that Stephen is very easily temperamental, whether it be angry, lovey-dovey. He doesn't have the psychopath control of his emotions. So I cannot see Stephen being able to shut off the emotional the emotions that would come from what they claim he did in order to have a normal phone call with his fiance.
No.
That's exactly right. And that's why sorry, Duke, that's why Kratz had to call him a multitasking killer.
Yeah.
Because they're listening to the calls that between him and Jody on October the 31st. This is the day in which Stephen is meant to be committing all this ultra violence with his nephew, and he's just casually talking to Jody as if nothing has occurred. So they're going, shit, there's nothing in his voice or stress or anything like that. Stephen is being very matter-of-factly. He's thinking about the future, and somehow he's got Teresa bowed up in his bedroom, committing all these acts of ultra-violence, including shooting, dismemberment, cremation, and he's just casually talking.
Stabbing. Yeah.
By the way, my sister's just left again. She's just left again. So he's putting all these minutiae about trivial things. Wait a minute, isn't he meant to be covering up this crime that he's committing with his nephew? Nothing. And remember, he rang up his brother too. He rang up his brother.
Yep.
Yeah.
Talking about phone calls, one of the biggest ones missed in the case was October 30th.
Correct.
At 8:43 p.m.
Correct.
When Brendan was there.
He was in the garage.
Yep.
Jody asked him, who are you talking to? Oh, Brendan. He's just helping me out in the garage.
Well, it was so funny, Sunshine, when you said that Stephen doesn't have the ability to manipulate his emotions that way. I completely agree. He's kind of like wear the emotions on your sleeve. He loses control of his emotions. It's very clear that he wouldn't be able to have the mental wherewithal to take that and manipulate it into nothing's going on. What's going on is what's going on with him.
That's right. You see it. You hear it.
All it made me think was that Stephen Avery is no Ken Kratz. So
no, he's definitely not a cool hand Luke for the older crowd.
Yes.
Definitely not.
And that's why Kratz called him a psychopath.
Right.
He called Stephen a psychopath because you think about it. You've got an unknown person. He hardly knew Teresa Hallbach. And according to what Brendan said, Teresa Hallbach is meant to be chained up and pinned up in his bedroom. And he's casually talking to his fiance as if nothing is occurring. No yelling, no screaming, no cries for help. You can't hear Brendan. Nothing. And that's why Kratz had to call him a psychopath, because even Kratz, even the state are going, wait a minute, we've got 2 15-minute phone calls plus a 5-minute phone call between Stephen and Chuck, where all this mayhem and torture, mutilation, dismemberment, cremation took place, and yet he's talking twice to his fiance. It made no sense. And that's why these guys have got no answer. They've got no answer. How can they now put in these phone calls between Stephen and Jody? And that's why they hammered on Jody. Oh, did he give you a secret code? Did you know what he was doing? And of course, there was nothing.
Nothing
Nothing
at all. Not a thing.
Not a thing.
They
just
really
wanna
worked on Jody.
Just some context to Candy Avery. We
Yep.
were discussing her. So the thing about Candy Avery for me that really exposes who she is, for me, all right, the kind of things that matter to her is when Earl was arrested. This is post 2007, when he was caught videotaping the underage girls changing and they to go to the pool, and she turned him in and she asked officers to delay serving and arresting him until after the family vacation. So he had been caught for at least the second time, behaving improperly with young females related to him. And Candy Avery turned in the evidence. She couldn't find the pictures to prove what she alleged against Stephen, but she turned in the evidence against Earl, but then asked officers not to arrest him until after they got back from the family vacation, which included some of the girls he was videotaping, from my understanding. So that to me says a lot about what matters to Candy Avery, or did in that time.
Well, when he got arrested ages ago, years ago, Jack 61 and I found, remember that document where she wrote a letter to Judge Hazelwood?
Yep.
Remember? Candy
That
said,
too.
please release my husband because he's got to come home and look after the family.
Yep.
Right? And yet, when Stephen was trying to do the same thing, she criticized him. So
Yep.
we've got a letter that she wrote to the judge saying, please release my husband, even though he committed acts of pedophilia against his own kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you now have got Earl appearing on Convicting a Murderer saying, I'm a rehabilitated person. You got Candy, who's spewing vitriol on Stephen, and her ex-husband is now he's now rehabilitated, whereas someone like Stephen, according to Earl and according to Candy, can never be rehabilitated. Do you understand? Do you see the hypocrisy?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think we've discussed this prior, but I know one, and I'm pretty sure both of Candy's brothers have been charged, and I know one of them went to prison for essaying females. So
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Candy also said, if you remember, Doc and everyone, she also said in Convicting Murder that big whopping fire that has never been reported anywhere.
Correct.
Surprised the house didn't burn down.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, she used the word whopping.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's funny. Where have we heard
did.
that word before?
Yep.
From a big whopping guy.
Yeah.
All
Isn't that funny?
I will move to my next one so we can get to Doc's stuff, because I know he's got another thing to do later. So I'm done with. I've said my piece about how Brendan really got sucked into this. I mean, literally, in a matter of just days, it was over. There's no doubt about it. Anyway, let's move on. My next subject, and this is a really sore spot for me, and I can tell you for sure, there's a bunch of guilters that hate my damn guts because I won't shut up about it. And this is the voicemail from the zippers. I'm going to tell you why. This is a real problem for me. I know other people say you're just grasping at straws, you're grappling, and I'll tell you some of the excuses and justifications for this. So I'm going to start out. I'm going to pop on the screen. This is only going to involve a couple of slides. The rest of it's going to be me running my mouth. But all this stuff is documented, so it's easily found. This is a report. This is Dettering's report. He actually wrote two this day when they went to the zippers. There's another one prior to another report. This is, I think, page 17 in case if anybody wants to look, whatever. Anyway, this is a little excerpt that's in Dettering's report. It should be noted that this voicemail message or answering machine message was subsequently copied by detective from Manitowoc, Dennis Jacobs, on Sunday, 11/6/05. Now, as far as I know, other than it being talked about in the Manitowoc summary report, this is the only line that says that somebody went and got Reniker. Apparently didn't do it when they were there that night of the 3rd for whatever reason. Don't know why, but he didn't. So this message gets recorded by Detective Jenkins, and it goes, we don't really know. Let's move on to, I got to skip to hold on here. We move on to this, and this is where the really problem comes in at. And you guys can comment. You can call me a dumbo, and I won't be offended. I've been called everything under the sun over this anyway. Yours got this list, this exhibit list actually, and this is Kraft's exhibit list that he prepared in January of 2007, a few weeks before trial. We don't know the exact date, but I'm going to say it was in probably 2 or 3 weeks before trial. It's divided up into sections. As you can see, the next one below this, all this audio stuff is the miscellaneous stuff, and it gives some bare description. There's some dates on some of this stuff. Anyway, when he got this when I was going through it, this immediately jumped out and slapped me right in the face. I'm like, well, what's he doing with the zipper voicemail 15 months after this whole thing it disappeared and down to a dark tunnel? Number one, as far as we know, again, I'm not convinced that we have every ledger that we're supposed to have. I think there are potentially more. And the ledgers, they're everything. That's what a police department collects. I know that, of course, Calumet had ones 300 plus pages. The DCI certainly has multiple ledgers as well, and we've got at least a good portion of them after the release of everything last October from the DCI, the data dump they did. Anyway, let's move on, and I'll be as brief as I can. And I'm going to explain why I believe that this recording exists, and I'll tell you why I believe it. We go 15 months, this recording that apparently was not property tagged, it was not put into the ledger, suddenly reappears in January of 2007 on Kraft's exhibit list that he's preparing for trial. Do I think he was sitting around doodling? I mean, he's got barbs there. It just, for me, something weird is going on here. I actually got into an argument today with a guy on Facebook. He says, well, it was lost. He lost the recording. I'm like, do you really think that there's only one recording, that he's carrying the master copy? That's not how they do things, man. I'm going to, again, briefly explain this for those that have not heard this. And you can look at pretty much a number of these things within what we've collected so far. They get the master copy, whatever that copy may be. This copy that Dennis Jacob took, that would be their master copy. They didn't take the answering machine. He made a recording of it, just like Barb's voicemail. They didn't take her answering machine. They made a recording. That is their master copy. It goes in and it gets logged in as evidence. It gives them a property tag. Let's just say Fassbender calls up or sends a email to whoever, hey, I need 5 copies of blah, blah, blah. If they haven't put this message on a server, which a lot of places do, they will, when they get it in, get it all ready to go, they'll make a copy and put it on their hard drive, a hard drive server, so they don't have to drag the original back out of its sealed packaging, right? So they can just go in and make a copy. That's the smart thing to do. This is what they do. The master copy is not just given out to somebody to carry around. That's the only damn copy they got. I mean, I cannot believe that somebody said that to me, especially someone, this guy, he's a guilter, and that's fine. I don't care. But clearly an educated person would think that Kraft is carrying around the only copy of this damn thing.
No chance.
Not a chance. No way in hell. That just doesn't work. But my next question is how, if it wasn't given a property tag, it wasn't entered into the ledgers, how did it end up on the list here? From that one, let's go back here. From this one line here in Dettering's report, back on, November 3rd, 2005. Come on, man. Something. Now, Kratz told me on X that he didn't have that. He didn't have this copy. So he told me, take it for what it is. I can't argue one with the other. I just know that it's on his list 15 months after it disappeared. I know Zellner's asked both MTSO and Queso for a copy. Neither one says it. No, I don't have it. Okay, well, let's just break that back, and I promise I'm going to be done. You guys can chew on this for a minute before we move on. Think about this. Larry Ledvana, he was a lieutenant, I think, by the time he retired, was records custodian for, I don't know, 10, 15 years at the Manitowoc. And how many times, not only Rookie, but others tried to get all the dispatch calls. I know that Rookie eventually ended up with 13 of them. That's the original 13 CDs, DVDs that we got back in 2018 or 19. And then Larry retires. Rookie rescinds his original request. I want all, I know that there's 35. I've got 13. I'm missing 22. Within 2 weeks, he had them. Within two weeks. There were, if I'm not mistaken, I'm a little fuzzy on this, but I believe that there were 20 CDs and 2 DVDs full of shit. So don't tell me that a department can't have stuff stuck in the closet. You know, hats off to Major Tom Cummings at MTSO for giving it up, saying, hey, yeah, I got them. What do you need? And it went from there. I mean, come on, man. So, again, this goes back to the question. If a piece of evidence is not property tagged, is not entered into a ledger, how did it end up on Kratz's list to begin with? From that one line, I don't believe it. I do not believe it. It just goes into a black hole and then suddenly reappears. I got a problem with that. And there's no way in hell. If you had a copy, it wasn't the only copy. It's crap.
No.
I'm done with what I'm going to present. You guys can talk about this or not. It just really irritates. I've heard every excuse under the sun why this piece of evidence is gone. Now, I lied. I'm going to add one more thing. This is the last, and Duke talked about emotional context a few minutes ago. Think about the emotional context of this last known voice of Teresa. Why wasn't it played over and over and over for that jury? It would have been a strong presented in that fashion, even if it's irrelevant, which I don't think it is. I think there's something very relevant on it. Otherwise, we'd have heard it. We know how long the call was, so they couldn't have chippity chopped too much, or it would have been noticed because of the phone bill, right? There's some reason that call was never made it to public. What that is, hey, I don't know. All right, I promise I'm done.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important point. I know there's some discussion that's happening on a Discord channel about Zipper's voicemail. And when you think about it, they played Barb's so-called Barb's recording, and Kratz used it as an emotional, to evoke an emotional response. Well, you would have thought that they would have played the Zipper's voicemail, right? The only reason I can think of why it's disappeared is because something that's on that recording is exculpatory for Stephen, right? Remember, there's been a lot of debate. Well, did Teresa go to the Avery salvage yard first, then go to the Zipperers, or did she go to the Zipperers and then her last point of call was the Avery salvage yard, right? There should be no reason why Kratz has lost the Zipperers voicemail. They've got a recording, they've got a master recording, and I agree. That's put on an evidence master sheet, master backup on a hard drive, and then copies are made on that, right? Anybody that does, say, in the music industry that does a recording, you have a master copy. That master copy, you then make a copy of that, and then you do your recordings.
That's
you never
right.
keep on going back to the master copy because you're going to wear it out. But you always have the master backup. The fact that now No one can find the Zipporah's voicemail, which is very reminiscent of when that guy phoned the MTSO to say, hey, look, I saw two guys pushing a RAV4, right? There's no recording, right? Where's that gone? Where's that gone? They can't find it. And now they can't find the Zipporah's voicemail. I think that's highly, highly suspicious, Jack 61.
I do too. And, I don't want to call Ken Kratz a liar. I think that would be the wrong thing to do. He said he didn't have it. But, my side of it is, how did it end up on your list? It got there somehow. And that's me. And I won't let it go until I get a definitive answer that I can't fight against. I'm going to keep requesting it from both CASO and or all three agencies.
It is important because did you see what Joellen wrote in that report? She didn't hear the phone call.
Yeah,
because she says that she was outside. So
trust me, bro.
It's another trust me, bro. Right? And when they asked Joellen, what time did Teresa Hobart come to your property? She gave a huge time range. You're thinking,
right. Mid-afternoon.
That they gave the opportunity of Teresa having left the Avery salvage yard and having gone to the Zipporahs.
That's right.
They left the door open. So hence, if there's something that's on that recording that is time stamped that doesn't fit with the narrative, you've just destroyed the state's case.
That's right.
So best not to bring it up because the defense will pound on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
And isn't it interesting Jack 61, that when Teresa rang the household, the Dassey household, Bobby Dassey goes, I didn't hear a thing.
Yeah.
Didn't hear the phone call.
What was that interview where, was it with Barb? Maybe on the 9th? But in that recording, the officer, they talk about how, hey, we heard that when you came home, Bobby mentioned that someone had called.
That's right. That's right. Bob said one of her kids said that, that woman was here taking photographs. So someone listened to the recording.
Yes.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, Jack, this is what's so wrong with this case. And that's, any case that has any form of integrity will let the facts speak for themselves and allow us to interpret them. In this case, we have Ken Kratz speaking his narrative and then us trying to pick apart what's true or not. That's just, if these guys had a lick of integrity as they went through this investigation, things would have been documented properly. Records would have been kept safe. Chain of custodies would have been held to a standard that's normal in these types of investigations, and none of those things happened. All we have is someone like Ken Kratz nowadays who's obsessively, still in the middle of this case, trying to control, manipulate, and dictate the narrative of what's true and what's not true. I'm so sick of it. I just wish that we could have things like this to, get our own opinion on it. Like let's have the facts, and then we can interpret it. People can interpret it how they want, but we don't have the facts.
What you need to do is to simply bypass Kratz. The moment you come to that conclusion, everything is resolved. You need to bypass him because he's totally irrelevant. Kratz is irrelevant. He's not associated with the case anymore. What Kratz is doing, he is trying to become the gatekeeper of information. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to put out spot fires. Foul play is something he's trying to put out. Why? Because many years after the case, we're still talking about it. What do the guilders want to do? The guilders want to shut Jack, me, you, Sunshine Christina, and Foul Play down. How do they do it? By personal and vitriolic attacks non-stop.
Yes.
And when they go after you in a personal matter, it means that what you're saying hurts them. what you're saying, you are getting closer to the truth.
Mhm.
They want to prevent and stop that. The aim of CAM was not to open the discussion, but to shut it down.
Yeah.
Shut
Exactly what it
it
was.
down. Let me tell you right now, I'm only a student of the Delphi murder case. I've just started. I see exactly the same things occurring there that are occurring in the Avery and Dassey cases. And that's right at the beginning. The Delphi murder case is right at the start. We're many years advanced. But right now, the same attacks are occurring as what we see now. And that's why I made the decision I've got to get out of X, because X was no longer productive, it was destructive.
It
And
still
so
isn't, Doc.
still is. And hence, I want to use my time to be constructive and do
Yeah.
these podcasts with you guys, because this is where we share, we learn, and people in chat, they contribute, and it's fantastic. Why non-stop argument all the time? As Jack 61 pointed out, no matter what you present, no one listens.
Mhm.
They don't want to listen.
Yeah.
Well, and again, to think that we have, a former district attorney who's going to take the time to seek out someone like myself's personal wedding page to take a screen grab of my wedding party, my close friends, and my
Wow.
family members that were a part of my wedding party, and post it on his Twitter and say that he was invited to reach out to these people. It shows, and I'm sorry, Jack, I'll do what you didn't feel like you could do. I know Ken Kratz is a liar. That statement, I was invited to reach out to. That's my family. Those are my close friends, none of which
Absolutely.
know Ken Kratz. So Ken Kratz is a liar. He is someone that is, unfortunately, very sick in the head. He needs help, but he does hold a lot of information in this case. He is a smart attorney. He does know his way around the law. That poses a specific kind of dangerous threat to normal people. And when, someone like myself, whose sole intent in all of this is to just find the truth, learn, discover, no matter which way it takes me, it says a lot that someone like Ken Kratz would, 20 years later, go as far into such lengths to silence people as he is.
Correct.
The only type of person that does that is someone who is protecting something.
Yes, and extremely worried, because I remember I had an argument with him on X. We're talking about the sex rape kit that was done in 1985 about the pubic hair. And he was questioning about the origins of the pubic hair, right? He was doing a crochet. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, this is a closed, sealed sex kit. Are you insinuating that somebody got into the sex rape kit in 1985 and put in pubic hairs belonging to Gregory Allen?
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I remember that.
And I thought my discussion with you is over, because if you are questioning that, that means that every potential rapist can say, I never did it, Your Honor. Somebody tampered with the sex rape kit. And you think to yourself, oh my God, and you're correct, Duke. Someone who continuously is putting out spot fires means that they are harboring knowledge and information that will blow open this case. They want to shut you down, Duke. They want to shut foul play down. Why? Because we keep on bringing up the case. They want that discussion gone, over with.
Absolutely.
If they really felt confident this case was not overturnable, they would not be so concerned with what we are doing. So
Correct.
The fact that they cannot leave it alone says there's stuff out there that concerns them. That's what it says to me. Because us doing what we're doing, if they have done everything the way it needed to be, the way they want us to believe that it's been done, and they've gotten rid of everything that they think could make to reopen this case or get them out of prison, they wouldn't care. They'd let us just continue to talk. These guys are retired, almost retired. They're not going to, but like their careers are where they're at. Us talking about this case, if there's nothing to be found, isn't going to hurt them.
But the trouble is, we are finding stuff.
Yep. And we're still finding stuff, which means there's still stuff to be found, which means that the song by Stacy Seabrook, Keep Talking Till They're Walking, is still on repeat.
There you go.
Yep.
Before Doc starts, I'm ready to kind of talk to Travis for a little bit. He says that list doesn't mean that Kratz had possession of it, does it? I would think it would mean that he had at least heard of it. Or to your point, he gave the list to the lead investigators and said, "Get me the stuff." I don't really know his process, Travis, of how that worked. Just kind of thinking about Kratz, he would, for him to put something, an attorney or district attorney to put something on an exhibit list just a few weeks before trial, to me, he's either seen it or has talked to someone that has it within their grasp or nearby. That's me. I don't know if that's true. That's me speculating of how they would operate, because you get to trial and all of a sudden your inventory is kind of skewed and you don't have this, to me, it means that somebody has put their hands on that thing and says, "I've got it." That's what it says to me. I could be wrong. Now, you asked another question. That's the normal course. DA gets me his list, get me that. Then the investigators grab it and say, "Oh no, this is bad. Maybe we lost it." What is missing from the exhibit list? The zipper voicemail. That's what's missing. The zipper voicemail. It was never
in the bloody object.
Well, that too. I almost added that one to talk about, but I know we could talk for hours about that. Mm-hmm. But the zipper voicemail was captured very early in the case. So I mean, it's the day after they found the rap.
Actually, so it's the bloody object.
Correct.
Actually, it was.
Yeah.
So,
but see, that narrative shifted. They had a narrative that they were going to run with. And in my opinion, this is my thoughts on what happened. They had a narrative of the crime. The jail calls changed the narrative they were going to go with. They had a pre-planned narrative of how they were going to frame Stephen for murder. The jail calls threw that plan out the window. So they had to, on the fly, come up with a plan B, which is where they needed a co-defendant that they could flip. That's when the Brendan Bobby came into play. That's my opinion. Because it went from a single person crime to they had to find a co-defendant to then have a
solidified. Had to put
right to make it where she never left the property. The crime occurred on the property, and that's why you have the shift. That's my opinion.
But to be fair, Sunshine Christine, I agree with you. However, Brendan Dassey destroyed the narrative. He muddied the narrative. The state
made it much worse.
It made it much worse. there's no way now for the state to incorporate the involvement of Stephen and the involvement of Brendan. What Brendan said, the narrative that Brendan said, completely destroyed everything because they can't fit it in. They can't fit it in.
Well, I mean, it destroyed their credibility, but it didn't destroy the plan because Stephen Avery is in prison and the lawsuit got stopped. So they achieved the goal. It just became much more sloppy and more obvious upon review and careful looking at the evidence.
Right, and to back you up, Sunshine, what happened during the trials, during the two different trials? You've got two different murder scenarios on the same victim.
Yep.
So Teresa Hawbuck died in two different ways, depending on what trial you're going to, and both Stephen and Brendan are in prison for the murder of Teresa Hawbuck by two different methods, two different ways.
Yeah. Henry's got a question.
And you got a documentary that exposes it all.
Henry says, do you think the blunt and bloody object is 1, evidence of a real murder of, 2, abandoned, planted evidence? You know, you could work it out. You could work it out both ways. If we're honest, you could.
So if we go with the evidence we have, the only blood of Teresa is the blood splatter on the back of her door, right?
In the rev, correct.
And it looks like blunt force trauma.
Yes, which is interesting, Sunshine, because that's my next presentation.
Yeah.
I'll be talking all about this.
Okay.
Right.
Well, then I'm going to stop talking.
Which is interesting because Henry hit a very important point.
He did. Yeah, you know, Travis, for me, this is troublesome. If this list had been prepared back in, middle of August 2006, or maybe even prior, he started working on an exhibit list, I probably would give it somewhat less credence, but the trial is impending. Yeah. And I just don't understand how the voicemail that's not property tagged, it's not entered into a ledger, how it's all of a sudden reappears. This is a problem for me. So that's my opinion. Anyway, it's just an opinion. I'm not asking anyone to agree with me. I think that voicemail exists somewhere. I don't know where, but I think somebody has. I think there's a master copy and probably other copies floating around. And
probably in Fassbender's drawer.
It'll be a miracle if we get it, ever. Okay, Doc, I've got your stuff loaded. What do you want me to do first? Or what do you want to do first?
Well, let me just introduce it first, and then we'll play the very first clip. You got the first clip?
I do.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, look, guys, my presentation is only going to be short, probably about 8 or 9 slides. But it's very interesting how the conversation has now gravitated towards what I'm about to talk to. So for me personally, I've always been interested in the state's case, what the state has presented, the theories that it's come up with regarding the murder of Teresa Hawbuck. And as you know, I've done a lot of reading with the Crew podcast with the Foul Play team. And my emphasis has always been on the forensic evidence. I like the approach of Kathleen Zellner and her experts in trying to debunk or try to reconstruct the state's case. There's one very important element that I'm going to go through that Ken Kratz presented during the trial. So Jack 61, are we able to play the very first clip? We've got one clip. Yeah. Have a listen to what Mr. Kratz says. Now, in that clip, it says closing argument. I double checked. It's actually the opening statement, not the closing. So here the jury is listening to Kratz's scenario of what took place. Jack 61, have you got that clip?
I do. And just for everyone out there listening, I have sped this up for other reasons. So, but it's still legible. So, and it's not very long. All right, it's going to start playing as soon as I load it. Here we go.
Stalky talked about the blood that was found in the back of the RAV4, where Mr. Stalky told you the blood suggests impact, or what's called projected blood, as if an individual was thrown into the back of the SUV that was on the back gate that Mr. Stalky talked about. We'll show you some pictures about that, as if the blood is splattering or is actually in movement as it hits the side of or the back gate.
Okay, so essentially what Mr. Kratz is saying, and remember, he's getting the blood spatter expert to give his opinion on what occurred. Now, we've heard from Brendan Dassey, and we've done very in-depth podcasts, Reading with the Crew podcast, about Brendan's recollections and Brendan's narrative. So essentially, what Brendan had told Fassbender and Wiegert, that in fact is not actually true, that after they'd shot Teresa Horbach, this is the third version of what Brendan said. After they shot Teresa Horbach, they picked her up and they placed her inside the RAV4. Now, the problem is that the forensic evidence is on and in the RAV4. So what Mr. Kratz was trying to tell the jury and the judge was, how could they account for the blood spatter that's on the back open door, the cargo bay door of the RAV4, because there's droplets of blood. And you can clearly hear what Mr. Kratz was saying was that both Stephen and Brendan had picked up Teresa Horbach after she had been shot at least twice in the head. One on the left temple, one in the back of the head that we know of, based on the forensic evidence on the cranial bone fragments. And according to Brendan, Teresa Horbach was shot a total of 10 times. So what Mr. Kratz is trying to say is Stephen and Brendan picked up Teresa Horbach, who must have been bleeding, and they threw her into the back of the RAV4. So now what I want to do is to totally debunk what Kratz said in court. Debunk totally his hypothesis that Stephen and Brendan had picked up Teresa Horbach, who was profusely bleeding, and they threw her into the back of the RAV, causing the blood spatter on that back door. Why this is so crucial is because it gives a totally different narrative to what happened to Teresa Horbach. What the state is saying is this, that Teresa Horbach and her RAV4 were present inside Stephen Avery's garage. Teresa Horbach allegedly was shot up to 10 times in Stephen's garage. Stephen and Brendan picked up Teresa Horbach and threw her in the back of her own RAV4, causing the blood spatter. Sunshine Christina made a very important point, and that is the only blood of Teresa Horbach that they found on the entire Avery salvage yard is present inside the RAV4. The investigators found no drops of her blood anywhere outside of the RAV4, neither in Stephen's trailer, between Stephen's trailer and the garage, and inside the garage where allegedly, think about it, a throat had been cut, she had been stabbed, she had been moved from the bedroom to the garage and then shot up to 10 times. There's been no evidence, no one's found any of her blood either in the trailer, between the trailer and the garage, or in the garage. And as Sunshine Christina pointed out, the only time they found her blood was present inside the RAV4. Now, you would think the state being so confident, as Duke pointed out, the state being so confident would say to Kathleen Zorner and her experts, here, take the RAV4, do whatever you want. We're confident in our conclusion. So Jack 61, can we have the very first slide, please?
Yep.
So what I did is I put together a little montage here, debunking the state's case. Now, the anatomy of what occurred to Teresa Halbach on October the 31st, 2005 is written on and in the RAV4. Now, if you look at the bottom right-hand picture, you can see that this is Teresa Halbach, taken, I think the picture was taken by Tom Pierce, would have been in 2005, of Teresa standing in front of her RAV4. If you look at the blinker light, you can tell that the blinker light is intact. In fact, her brother has been asked to produce pictures of Teresa's RAV4 showing damage to her RAV4. My understanding is that no one has been able to bring forward a picture showing her blinker light and bumper being damaged. Is that correct, guys?
As far as I know.
No one has been able to bring forward a picture showing damage to her RAV4. Sunshine.
No, I was just going to say there was discussion that there was evidence of that, but it was never produced.
Correct. So if we look at the top left-hand corner, what you can see is clear damage to her RAV4. So her RAV4 was found on November the 5th, 2005 in the Avery salvage yard. Now, you could see that there's extensive damage to Teresa's bumper. This is the driver's side bumper. No one who saw Teresa's RAV4 on October the 31st ever mentioned damage to that RAV4. No one. In fact, everyone has said that the RAV4 looked new. If you look at the poster, of the missing person poster describing the RAV4, no one mentioned the fact that her RAV4 in particular had this diagnostic damage. So normally when they put out a description of a vehicle, they'll say, oh, there was damage to the roof or damage to a fender. No one had reported damage, obvious damage to her front bumper. Now, you could see that in the back of her RAV4, the broken blinker light was placed underneath the seats in the cargo bay. So quite clearly, her RAV4 sustained damage. Now, no one reported seeing any of that damage on October the 31st, because remember, she went to several places and they saw her RAV4. No one said, oh, I noticed this damage to her RAV4. So somehow her vehicle sustained this damage to the bumper. Someone picked up the blinker light and placed it in the back cargo bay. In order to place the blinker light in the cargo bay, you have to open the cargo bay door, right? You have to go to the back of the RAV4, open the cargo bay door and place it underneath the seat. So somehow, I believe, and many people believe, that the damage to the RAV4 has got something to do with the murder of Teresa Halbach. What is interesting is this. When Teresa arrived at the Avery salvage yard to take a photograph of Barb Yunder's van, two people, and only two people, as far as I'm aware, saw Teresa Halbach at the van. That was Stephen Avery, that was Bobby Dassey. When Bobby Dassey went out to go hunting, he stated that he had a glimpse of Teresa Halbach's RAV4. Bobby Dassey never saw Stephen. Bobby Dassey never saw Teresa. Bobby Dassey never saw any violent encounter or struggle or cry for help, gunshots, nothing. He only glimpsed Teresa Halbach's RAV4, according to what Bobby said. What is interesting is this. When the RAV4 was photographed in the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, what they noticed was on the back cargo door were droplets of blood, right? Now, this is very important, very, very important. And it's a point that Jack and Sunshine Christina have brought up, especially getting the Unfold search warrant. This all now becomes very relevant. In regards to the broken blinker light, it was claimed that Teresa Halbach had put in an insurance claim. The trouble is that when Kathleen Zellner looked into this, Teresa Halbach never placed an insurance claim for a broken blinker light. There's no evidence of it. There is an insurance claim where Teresa had replaced a wiper blade on the RAV4, but never a broken blinker light. Therefore, this damage, I believe, and many others believe, and same with Kathleen Zellner, this damage to her vehicle has got something to do with the murder of Teresa Halbach. Very, very interesting. So now we have a broken bumper bar. We have a broken blinker light that's been placed in the back of the RAV4. We've got Teresa Halbach's blood present on the back door of her RAV4. Sunshine, did you have a comment? Sunshine.
I was just going to say that the blinker light clearly is something that they were not aware of when they created the first narrative of her disappearance. And so when it occurred, we may not be sure, but it definitely was not something known to those who were describing the vehicle. I think that's clear because it was never mentioned.
Yes. Now, what's interesting is that Ertl, on November the 5th, when he was there, he described the damage to the RAV4. So he had noted the damage to the RAV4. Now, quite clearly, you can see that the cargo bay door was photographed when they opened up the RAV4, and the broken blinker light is there, right? Now, what is interesting is that the state has continuously denied access of the RAV4 to Kathleen Zellner and her experts. The experts, the state won't even give the broken blinker light to Kathleen Zellner and her experts, or even the number plates. They have denied any access to Kathleen Zellner and her experts to do further forensic testing. Now, let's have a look at the next slide, Jack 61. So quite clearly, the RAV4 is crucial to unraveling what happened to Teresa Halbach. Now, Tom Fallon said the following. Jack 61, do you see the slide?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to read what Tom Fallon said? This is during Brendan Dassey's trial.
Yep. Teresa Halbach's body was located into the rear of an SUV after she was shot. How do we know that? The defendant told us that they did that. Well, we have Sherry Culhane and Nick Stockey to tell us about that.
Okay, now remember, guys, we've done a massive deep dive into Brendan Dassey's narrative, everything. And Brendan Dassey told Fassbender and Wiegert 3 different scenarios of what they did to Teresa Halbach. Remember Jack 61? Remember Duke? Remember Sunshine Christina?
Oh, yeah.
First scenario, we took her outside and we shot her on the side of the garage. No. That cannot be right. Oh, okay. We placed Teresa Halbach in the RAV4 and shot her in the RAV4. Oh, no. That cannot be right. Oh, that's right. We placed Teresa Halbach in the RAV4. We took her out of the RAV4 and we shot her on the garage floor. Oh, okay. So that's the scenario they went with. So remember what Kratz said in that slide right at the beginning, that Stephen and Brendan shot Teresa Halbach in the head and in the body up to 10 times. They picked her up and they flung her in the back of her own RAV4. But wait a minute. Why would they flung her in the back of the RAV4 only to take her back out and then take her to the burn pit. It made no sense whatsoever. Because remember what Brendan said? Oh, that's right. We placed her on the blackjack creeper and we carried her out, obviously walking straight past Bear, and that we placed her in the burn pit. So if you look at the picture on the right-hand side, Nick Stolke said, and I quote, bloody hair that has come in contact with that surface. And have you ever look on the right-hand side, you can see that there is blood that's present on the plastic molding inside of Teresa's RAV4. So now we have, and that blood was tested by Culhane. That blood belongs to Teresa Hallbach. So quite clearly, you've now got Teresa's blood on the open back door of the RAV4. We've got Teresa's blood present on that plastic molding. So the state came up with the idea, the hypothesis, that Stephen and Brendan, after shooting Teresa Hallbach, grabbed Teresa Hallbach and threw it into the back of her RAV4. Now, Jack 61, if we have a look at the next slide. So that's what the state have gone for so far. So Kathleen Zellner did a reconstruction. She bought an identical RAV4 and she wanted to work out, all right, how do we reproduce these blood stain patterns in the RAV4? How do we do it? And as you can see, she got a model about the same size, weight, height as Teresa Hallbach, and they placed her in the back of the RAV4. And what they found was that her head, the model's head, will come in contact with the plastic molding, which means that Teresa was bleeding from the head. There's no dispute. She was bleeding from the head and her hair came in contact with the plastic molding. But if you notice, there's a streak pattern to the blood. And there's a big problem. Where is the rest of the blood in the RAV4 cargo bay? If Teresa Hallbach was shot up to 10 times, twice in the skull, the rest in the body, remember, she was placed in the RAV4 naked, no clothes. Hence, there would have been blood, tissue, hair everywhere. You don't find that in the RAV4. So, remember Jack 61. Is there a carpet piece that's missing? There's no carpet mat in that RAV4. Jack 61, do you have any comments?
Oh, the cargo mat. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you have a look at the blood suddenly stops on the carpet. It stops. Yep. There's a delineation of where the blood stops.
Runs a straight line.
Straight line down. So somehow you've got someone who's profusely, allegedly bleeding from multiple gunshots, throat cut, stabbed in the stomach, placed in the back of her RAV4, naked, and there's only blood in that particular spot and on the open door. Something is not quite right. But if you look at the blood streak, the blood experts of Kathleen Zellner have theorized that Teresa was transported somewhere, placed in the back of a RAV and transported to another location. So her head would have been moving in the back of the car, back of her RAV4. So there's no doubt that that's Teresa's blood on that plastic molding. But wait, Mr. Kratz said that Stephen and Brendan had thrown Teresa Hallbach in the back of the RAV. So Jack 61, if we can have a look at the next slide. So now it starts to become more complex. I'll just wait till that next slide comes up.
Sorry about that.
No hassles.
There we go.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. And oh boy, Jack61 and I have had millions of arguments on X. Now, when they brought in the RAV4 into the cargo bay at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, they asked Culhane and they asked Stolke, what do you do with the RAV4? Well, what they do is they walk around the RAV4 and they look for stains. And it just so happened that Stolke saw a stain right at the back of the RAV4 near the latch, where you have to open up the latch to open the door to place Teresa Hallbach and also the light in the back of the RAV4. So now we come to a very intriguing piece of forensic evidence. Jack61, if you can lower it a little bit from the top, beautiful. Jack61 or Sunshine Christina, can someone who would like to read out the question?
I'll read the question.
Okay.
Jack61, would you read out the answer, please?
Sure.
So this is Culhane being asked about this stain at the back. Let's go for it.
And do you recall whether there were swabs of the cargo door handle?
The very back, there was I did take a swab of and I believe it was my item A23 because analyst was processing that area and saw something, and I did swab that area and I did extract it.
Okay. You did extract a sample?
Yes.
Okay, so before we do the right-hand side, so make no mistake, the blood spatter expert noted blood on the door handle, right?
Yep.
So now Culhane did a swab, A23. Culhane was able to definitively show by presumptive test the presence of blood on swab A23. So there was blood. Culhane was able to extract genomic DNA from that swab. Now, let's go to the right-hand side and let's continue. Guys, would you like to continue your speaking part?
Sure.
Yes. That's the item then that became A23.
Yes.
And you tested that with a swab for DNA, right?
Yes.
And you did not find Mr. Avery's DNA on that swab, did you?
No. No.
And I can read the other part just underneath. On the other,
Oh, is
on
that
the
part?
on the right-hand side, it continues.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry. No. Based on my results, I didn't find Stephen Avery's DNA on that sample.
In fact, you found Mr. Avery's DNA nowhere on the rear of that vehicle at all, correct?
Correct.
Oh boy, this is devastating, right? So when Culhane extracted item A23, she got a partial profile. You don't need a full profile to exclude or include someone. If you've got alleles that don't match Stephen Avery, it's not Stephen Avery, even if you've got a partial profile. And Jack61 and I have had countless arguments on X saying, oh, no, you can't exclude Stephen Avery. Yes, you can, right? If you have a partial profile and the alleles are different to Stephen's profile, it's not Stephen.
Not Stephen. It's not Brandon. He said that's that simple.
And quite clearly, Culhane excluded Stephen Avery from item A23. She stated it right there.
Yep.
But let me tell you right now, there's no way that Culhane would have ever spoken about A23. She was asked by attorneys to talk about A23. Otherwise, she never would have mentioned it.
No.
No chance in hell. But it gets better. You want to read what Riddle said?
Absolutely. Sunshine.
So you got, yep.
Okay. And you compared, oh no.
No.
Okay. Okay. But you found one, right? Where we saw on the earlier close up. One right next to where the key goes in for the cargo gate.
That is correct.
And you compared those fingerprints to the fingerprints standard of Mr. Stephen Avery.
Yes, I did.
And they did not match, correct?
No, they did not. That's correct.
So if you shift the picture to the back cargo gate, let's think about this. On the back cargo gate, you've got fingerprints that do not belong to your primary suspect, Stephen. Those fingerprints don't match Brendan Dassey's either. Now, this cargo door is what the killer or killers had to have opened in order to place Teresa Hallback in the back of her RAV4. Guys, would you agree?
Absolutely.
There's no question about that. You had to open up the cargo door. That cargo door contains fingerprints that do not belong to Stephen or Brendan. Furthermore, there is a sample of blood, which meant that someone had bled on the cargo door gate. That DNA has been excluded from Stephen. Culhane never mentioned Brendan, but Culhane had Brendan's profile. Culhane also had Teresa Hallback's profile as well. She never mentioned Teresa Hallback in a court of law. So, to me, if I was to summarize this, that blood, those prints, do not belong to Stephen, Brendan, or Teresa. Guys, would you agree? Because Culhane had their profiles on computer. So she would have said, oh, but I can't exclude Brendan or I can't exclude Teresa. The only thing that Culhane said, very clever, was it's not Stephen. Would you guys agree?
Yeah. And I would even
Yeah.
go one step further and say she also had Chuck, Dolores,
Yes.
Earl, and who else's? Bobby's.
All of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
So
All of
she
them.
knows. So it was none of their blood. And so it belongs to someone other than the victim or the
The
Avery.
Yep.
Yep.
And
Avery Dassey's.
okay.
I think it's the killers. But that's me.
Yep. Now, do you think, let's become impartial here and ask a general question. You have discovered as a crime lab tech an unknown genomic DNA profile on the victim's vehicle. You have developed a partial profile. You haven't got a full profile. Do you think it would have been a priority, and I asked the people in chat this too, do you think it would have been a priority to re-extract A23, get a full genomic profile and run it through CODIS?
Yep.
Do you think that's reasonable to suggest?
Absolutely.
I think it's the logical next step to solve the case.
Do you think Culhane re-extracted item A23?
No.
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 No. So potentially we have an unknown genomic DNA profile on the victim's vehicle on the door that you need to open to place the victim inside the back of her own RAV4.
That's right.
State never re-extracted it. But it gets better. So if we have a look at the next slide at Jack 61, I'm nearly finished. So Kathleen Zellner asked the question about the blood spatter on the back cargo door. And she spoke with Stuart James. Stuart James is a bloodstain pattern analyst. He's written a lot of papers. He's an expert at it. And what he did is he looked at how the blood fell onto the door, how it was deposited to the door, and how it ran down. And he hypothesized that this blood, because of the angle that the blood traveled down the door, could not have been from getting someone and flinging them from the ground into the back of the RAV4. Otherwise, the droplets of the blood would have been going in the direction that Teresa Halbach was thrown into the RAV. So what was done by Zellner and her associates was to do a reconstruction. How can we reconstruct the blood spatter pattern on that back door? Now, they tried with a dummy, putting blood in the hair and swinging the person into the back of the RAV. No matter what they did, they could never reproduce that blood-stained pattern that's on the back of the RAV4 door. What they found was every time they swung the dummy to throw the dummy into the back of the RAV, the direction of the blood went towards into the cargo bay door. Guys, we're all happy with that?
Absolutely.
Every time they swung the model dummy, the blood spatter pattern showed a projection going in towards the back of the RAV4. So now there was a problem. They could not reproduce that blood spatter pattern. What Stuart James suggested was, it's likely that what had occurred was Teresa Halbach was struck with a metal object, a blunt object, like a hammer. And you can see the hammers in front of Stuart James. So what Kathleen Zellner did was that she put white sheets of paper on her RAV4, which is the same model as Teresa's, very, very similar to Teresa. And what they found was, you can see the guy and blood being placed on the hammer, simulating hitting someone in the head that's low to the ground, and throwing back the hammer. So you're striking Teresa Halbach in the head and you're swinging back towards the open back door. They then looked at the blood distribution pattern, and guess what? It fit. It actually fit what was seen on the original RAV4 door, which meant by experimentation, they were able to show that it's very likely Teresa was struck in the skull by a blunt object multiple times when she was low to the ground. So she could have been a surprise attack, struck on the head, fell to the ground, and was repeatedly bashed with a hammer or some type of maybe a tire lever. And as a consequence of being repeatedly struck and the blunt object going back, the blood flung directly to the back of the door. They were able to reproduce the findings of what occurred. Sunshine.
I'll wait until you're finished with yours because I just have an idea, but I'm going to wait.
Okay. So now it allows one to come up with a scenario that somehow with the broken blinker light, Teresa Halbach either crashed into something or was run off the road or struck something, which allowed her to come out of her vehicle. And either she picked up the broken light or someone else did. So she's had a run-in with some other person or party. By taking that light or whoever to the back of her RAV4, she had to open up the back door. Whoever she was with surprised her and attacked her, knocked her to the ground and knocked her out. It's very likely that if she was repeatedly struck with a hammer or a tie iron, she could have been killed then and there. Whoever had attacked her had placed her in the back of her own RAV4, and her attacker was bleeding as well and left their blood on the back door, because the person or persons placed Teresa in the back of her own RAV4 and was bleeding and left their blood on the back door, back cargo door, item A23. And Teresa Horbach was transported elsewhere. Now, Jack 61, if we look at the next slide, this goes to show you the importance of a crime scene reconstruction. We'll just wait for the next slide to come up. Jack 61, you got the next slide? Oh, he might have dropped out.
He's still showing on the feed.
Yeah. Yep. Jackie, you still there?
I'll go ahead and share my thought.
Okay.
So I was just thinking about where they placed Stephen's blood at the front, and
Correct.
logical ways that the person who let's just stick with incapacitated Teresa could have had themselves gotten an injury. When you strike someone, so my first thought was an inexperienced person who shoots a gun sometimes or puts a clip in a gun. Sometimes you'll pinch between your thumb and your forefinger, okay, and that causes bleeding. Or you can pinch your palm when you slap it into the clip, into the chamber, or into the gun when you're nervous, right? It's not just inexperience, it's nerves. If you've never, knowingly planned and committed a first degree homicide. The other thing is when you strike someone with an object, there is reciprocal force at work.
Correct.
And it could have flown back and hit them. And let's say it struck them and they wiped their hand and they're in a hurry. They wipe their hand. Their next move is going to be to open the door.
Yes.
To scoop her up and put her in, because she's already placed the light in. And so they put her in, or maybe they have a tarp, put the tarp in, then put her in, because the blood is contained to the one side. And that's how the light got shoved up like it did. So, and it's also probably a clue to why they placed the blood where they placed it, because subconsciously they're thinking about where they could have left their DNA. And one of those places would be near the keyhole because of opening that latch, and they knew they had blood on their hand when they did it. So it caused them to then think about putting blood next to where he put the key. Just a thought. Because, our subconscious tells on us. Remember what Michael O'Kelly said, the truth is but a chameleon within our words. And the truth is always trying to be told, because that's how the universe stays right, is on truth. It doesn't work on lies. It works on truth. And the truth is simple. So we just have to unravel the lies, and the truth is there for everyone to see, But there's a quote, I can't remember if it was Albert Einstein that said it, but a lie will travel all the way around the world before the truth gets its shoes on.
Yeah.
And that's very true. Are you back, Jax? Are you? Huh. That's interesting. I hope
Yeah,
he's
he might be frozen out.
yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I
But,
would like to see, has she tried to get access to 823, Kathleen Zellner?
that I'm not 100% sure, but it's quite clear that item A23, in
Uh-huh.
my opinion, is top priority to re-extract.
Okay.
You definitely would want to re-extract that, get a full profile, and run it through CODIS to see what that brings up. I would also run CX as well. That was found at Mickles Quarry as unknown male blood. They've got a full profile. That hasn't been run through CODIS. The other thing that they could potentially do with A23 is to do SNP analysis and try that to see if there's family members in the database that they could potentially find. Okay. Jack, are you there?
I am.
Okay, good. I'm hanging up on you now then.
Jack, are you able to advance the slide?
Yes. Sorry about that.
No, not at all.
There we go.
All right. So what we can see here is the blood distribution pattern on that door. So the important thing is this. There's a concentration of those blood drops all in one particular corner, which means that Kathleen Zellner was able to reproduce this type of blood pattern with the person being low to the ground, right? So being repeatedly struck with a metal object, flinging it back, you can see that there's a concentration of those blood droplets all on the corner of the door. Why is this important? It means that despite Kathleen Zellner and her team trying to reproduce the flinging of a person from outside to inside the RAV4, she was not able to reproduce that pattern. But she was able to reproduce that pattern by having a person low to the ground being repeatedly struck. This debunked the state's hypothesis that Stephen and Brendan had picked up Teresa Halbach and flung her in the back of the RAV4. It now introduces another scenario involving damage to the broken blinker light. Teresa Halbach getting out of her RAV4, going to the back of her RAV4, being attacked, surprise attack by somebody, could be one or two individuals, them bashing her in the head, bludgeoning her in the head with some type of blunt object, picking her up, placing her in the back of her RAV and driving her to another location. Guys, this totally exonerates both Stephen and Brendan being involved in any form of attack on Teresa Halbach. Remember what I said. Bobby Dassey never saw Teresa after he came out to go bow hunting. Never saw Teresa. Never saw Stephen. Never heard any cries for help. Never heard of any type of violence going on. Never heard any gunshots. And remember Jack 61 and Sunshine Christina. What did the investigators do? They got a cadaver dog to go right around Stephen Avery's trailer. Were there any hits of the cadaver dog outside of Stephen's trailer?
No.
None. Which meant that if Teresa Halbach was bludgeoned, it meant that she would have shed blood near where the RAV4 was parked. Would you agree?
Yep.
That's where allegedly the attack would have taken place. No cadaver dog alerted outside of Stephen Avery's trailer, and the dog went right around it. Never picked up any blood at all. Jack 61, any questions?
Well, you know, we've talked about this before. I don't want to dive too far into it, but we know that Brutus was taken inside.
Yes.
On the afternoon of November 5th and embarked in the laundry bath area, which was come to find out was Stephen's blood.
Correct.
That's it. Then didn't alert in the master bedroom where all this ultra violence was allegedly had taken place.
Correct. And Brutus never made a beeline to go inside the garage.
Nope.
Right? So
Nope.
now we've got this amazing pancaking of evidence or lack of evidence. A lack of a dog, Brutus, hitting inside Stephen Avery's master bedroom. No alert. Brutus alerting in Stephen Avery's bathroom and laundry area. What did they find? Blood. What did Stephen say he did on, I think it was November the 3rd? He cut open his finger. He had to go inside.
Yeah, he rebusted his finger or something.
He reopened his finger. Brutus picked that up. Human remains detection dog went right around Stephen Avery's trailer. No alerts outside, right? But we've now shown, Kathleen Zahn has now shown that you can reproduce the blood spatter pattern on that back door by having someone being bludgeoned. That completely alters the state's narrative and case. So now, Jack 61, nearly finished. We'll look at the next slide. It's explained by simple physics, the movement of blood through the air. When the blood hits at 90 degrees flat onto a surface, what does it do? It drips down.
Yep.
And Jack 61, if you can just expand that picture a little bit, you notice on the left-hand side, do you see Teresa's blood? The blood drops straight down.
Yep.
By gravity. So there's a spray of blood, not just one blood droplet, many. It's hit at 90 degrees and the blood has gone straight down. Now, if Teresa was flung into the back of her RAV4, the blood will go from right to left. You see where I've got the X? There were no blood droplets going in that direction there. All the blood droplets went straight down, destroying Stokey and Kratz. Boom, debunked.
You know what else that says? It just clicked. You know what else it says that it went straight down? That the door was open
Correct.
for a long enough period of time that the blood was not moved by the door shutting either.
Nope.
So wherever this occurred, it occurred in a place where someone was comfortable enough to leave the door open while they committed the next acts.
At least for a period of time. That's right.
Yes.
That's huge, actually.
Yeah, and if you notice, you know the Toyota sign, the Toyota tire cover, there's streak marks as if somebody had grabbed the tire and slid.
Yes.
Prints, unfortunately, they couldn't get fingerprints, but someone had grabbed that tire and slid their fingers down that tire. I wonder if that was either Teresa or the killer. But
it could have been the killer. It could have been the person incapacitating her, holding the tire while hitting with the other hand, or it could have been Teresa trying to grab hold of the tire in a way to get up back on her feet to better defend herself.
Or there was an altercation that took place, and she was in the process of running and struck in the head.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
now
I have another problem. You brought up the tire cover. And I have to mention it. The tire cover comes back on, I think, May 24th, 2006. Uyghur gets it. Apparently, it had to be that day or the day after because it never got his property tag. He takes it. He takes it and keeps it for 35 days. Turns it into Hawkins at the end of June. Doesn't write a report. Doesn't explain what he did. for all we know, that's not even the same tire cover that he turned in.
Yep. Unbelievable. So now you can see how dangerous this is and how damaging it is, because Zellner and her experts, using simple logic and crime scene reproduction, were able to totally debunk the state's blood spatter analysis and what Kratz was telling the jury, that Stephen and Brendan could not have shot Teresa Hallbach up to 10 times, grabbed her and thrown her in the back of her RAV4. The forensic evidence debunks it. Now notice we have not relied on anyone's testimony. We've only looked at forensic evidence.
The forensic evidence in this case supports the defense's, which is Stephen's statement of his activities, and disproves every story the prosecution tried to get us to buy.
Correct. Now, thanks to Sunshine Christina, if we have a look at the next slide, I'm nearly finished, guys. Would you like to read this out? Because isn't this the one that you got, the unfold search warrant?
Yep, I'll read it.
Let's go for it.
Your applicant was also informed by investigator Tom Fassbender from the Wisconsin Department of Criminal Investigation that blood was found in the 1997, wrong year, Toyota RAV4 belonging to Teresa Hallbach and located within the Avery Auto Salvage compound. Stephen Harrington of the state of Wisconsin Crime Laboratory in Madison stated that technicians had located presumptive blood in the rear cargo portion of the vehicle and also in the front of the vehicle in the ignition area. Steve Harrington further indicated that technicians also located visible palm prints on the rear hatch area of the Toyota RAV4. There was also a blunt instrument upon which blood was found, located in the rear of the vehicle. Mark Wiegert, November 7th, 2005.
Jack 61, any comments?
Well, this is the Cuss Road search warrant. This is one part of his affidavit, his sworn statement. There were 17, I think, points, 17 or 18, something like that. I can't remember. This is one of them. And this is a huge, huge thing. It's mentioned one time. This is the only place. And Christina was actually trying to get something else, and she ended up with this. And it was just crazy time, man.
I was meant to get this.
Yeah.
I was actually seeking I was trying to get the original application form for search warrants because they had commented in an exchange we were having about how a search warrant was applied for and received, that there was a form that was filled out or some sort of something to that effect, which led me to believe that they had a form that officers would use to apply for a search warrant. That's what I wanted, and this is what I received. And
interesting.
Yeah, very interesting, because I still didn't get the form.
No,
but that's Wisconsin for you.
I'm glad you got this.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh yeah. What is very interesting is that you can see that in the CASO report, the investigators were looking for an object from the road emergency side kit. They were looking for a tool, right? They were looking for a tool, which is very, very interesting. Now, for what I just presented, it's pretty obvious that the forensic evidence suggests that Teresa Halbach was bludgeoned at the back of her own RAV4, right?
Yep.
That will explain the broken bumper bar. That will explain the broken blinker light. That will explain the presence of the broken blinker light in the back of her RAV4. That explains the blood distribution pattern on the open door. And that explains the blood inside the RAV4 from a head wound. Now, people have shown that when you're stabbed with a knife, when you're shot with a bullet, the blood that squirts out is completely different profile than what you see on the back of the door. It's not high velocity spatter that you get from a gunshot, because from a gunshot, the blood is like a mist, a very fine mist. With a knife, it's a totally different distribution pattern of the blood droplets. This is indicative of someone being bludgeoned on the ground, right? And lo and behold, you have an unfold search warrant that says, we found a blunt instrument that's got blood on it. And Jack 61 will tell you that the guilters have said that was a mistake.
Yeah, the boo-boo.
So
that was a mistake. That sentence was written as a mistake.
So how do you get a woman to stop? How do you get someone to pull over in an area? You
hit their car.
That's right. You have a vehicle and you pull out in front of them. You put down stop strips or shoot out their tire, or you pull them over pretending you're a cop and they, like they're violating the law. Those are like three obviously easy ways to get someone to stop in their tracks, right? And we have the missing tire cover for 35 days. We have the search of the tire instrument. So, and we have the broken blinker light. So I'm wondering now if perhaps somebody didn't maybe do. I wonder what a pit maneuver would have done.
That would have involved the back of the car.
I wonder if you can pit maneuver the front from, like, I'll have to look into that. Like, could you do a pit maneuver from the front that could cause that sort of damage to the front of
you could kind of move over and bash in. Yeah, sure.
Like brake check them or something real quick, unsuspecting.
Pass them and kind of dart over.
Yep. And who would know how to do that? A trained officer in that kind of maneuver.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Travis, to answer your question, did Casey ever try to talk to Harrington? Not that I don't know if she tried. It's unknown to us.
I don't see anyone from Wisconsin volunteering to speak with her at this point. But anyone employed with the state of Wisconsin, I should say.
Yep.
I hope they are. I hope there's someone moral enough that has information, that is tired of losing sleep and feeling guilt over innocent men sitting in prison for a crime they didn't commit.
Correct. Sorry, Jack 61.
I was just going to say, I'll be shocked if that happens, Christina. Go ahead, Doc.
Well, you've got this great dilemma. I've studied this case like you guys for years. The state have got no idea how Teresa Halbach died. They don't. They've got no idea. Brendan's narrative doesn't make things simpler. It makes things more complex. Now, somehow, according to the state, Teresa was subdued in some manner and ended up being pinned to Stephen Avery's bed. Now, when they asked Brendan Dassey, did you notice any blood on the pillow, anything like that? No, no blood. He noted no blood. And they found no blood inside Stephen Avery's trailer in his master bedroom. Now, think about this. If it was Stephen that bashed Teresa Halbach in the head with a blunt metal object, she would be bleeding profusely, right? And if he took Teresa Halbach, there'll be blood dripping everywhere, leading all the way up to the bedroom. When Brendan said he saw Teresa Halbach pinned up in the bed, he never mentioned the presence of any blood. And remember, Brendan Dassey's got syncope. He fainted at the sight of blood. Brendan never mentioned any presence of blood on the sheets, on the pillowcases, nothing. So therefore, if it wasn't Stephen who had bashed her, who did? Where did this violent event take place?
That's right.
And it couldn't have occurred near Stephen Avery. It had to have occurred either further down from where Stephen Avery was or off the Avery salvage yard. Would you guys agree?
Completely agree.
I agree with that. I disagree that the state has no idea what happened to Teresa Halbach.
Okay.
I
know.
believe that they know exactly what happened to her, and I believe that they had a plan. That plan fell through of how they were going to convict Stephen for this crime. They already had the knowledge that they could take a crime Stephen didn't commit and convict him for it and get away with it because it had already been done, right? Because what's her face? What's that woman's name I don't like? That investigated it.
Strauss.
Yeah, Strauss had already investigated this case and knew that he was wrongfully convicted and volunteered to help them do it again because she wasn't a fan of his. All right. Nope. So they knew he had been framed once. And even if they had never personally participated in framing of someone, they knew it could be done.
Correct.
All right. So they, if at minimum, took a crime Stephen didn't commit yet again and chose to make it look like he did. Now, the issue is the original plan fell through because this is my belief. This has not been proven yet. I think someone forgot to turn off the jail phone calls, the jail phones, and they were unaware that there was phone calls tying Stephen to the property that could not be disappeared. There were too many other people with knowledge of them that would have had to have been brought in that weren't part of the as Dave Bagaka would say, the club. All right. And that being said, they had to wing it and come up with a plan B crime narrative.
Yep. I agree.
Yep. And
yeah, I agree.
so they rewrote the script, and this is what we have now, and which is why it's so convoluted and just and completely like
nonsensical. Totally nonsensical. I agree. I think they were going with the narrative that she was attacked, that Stephen had followed her and attacked her off the Avery salvage yard.
Mm-hmm.
But phone calls tied him to the salvage yard. They tied him to his property.
I think 3302 Xander Road was probably going to be a crime scene, which is why you have Colburn staging that address, documenting that address with crime scene film. crime scene photographs, and then you have a blocking of that area going on, a unwritten about roadblock that was instituted by the officers of Manitowoc. That area was closed off for several hours. They also redirected traffic in a way which left them a straight line from Xander to Avery's. And then after that roadblock was lifted, then the evidence started being, quote, discovered, unquote. And I think it's all pretty clear once you start looking at what is undeniable and undisputed, because there's multiple pieces of physical evidence proving that it occurred. It's just filling in the details that we can't fill in because of the evidence that that has yet to be retrieved. Number one being the zipper voicemail. If in fact the Dassey, what's been labeled the Dassey voicemail, is the zipper voicemail, then things make a lot more sense. She went to Avery's, and then whatever happened to her happened after she left the zippers.
Yep. All right. Just let me finish my last slide. Jack 61, if we put up the last slide. Shall we read a point each?
Sure.
Yeah, Jack 61, if you go first.
Okay.
This is a summary of my presentation.
The state's narrative on how Teresa's blood on the rear inner cargo door was deposited is fundamentally flawed. It cannot be reproduced by reconstruction.
The blood distribution pattern on the rear inner cargo door can be reproduced and explained by blood being flung from a bloody object, such as a hammer striking an object low on the ground. This refutes the state's narrative that Teresa was flung into a RAV4.
The prints on the rear cargo door latch do not match Stephen Avery.
The blood found near the rear cargo door latch, item A23, was extracted by Culhane.
The partial DNA profile, which was remarkably unpublished from item A23, had excluded Stephen Avery.
Culhane made no mention of excluding Brendan Dassey and Teresa Halbach from item A23, even though she had their DNA profiles.
Who bled and left their blood, item A23, and prints on Teresa's RAV4 cargo door latch. A priority is to re-extract item A23 and run it through CODIS, SNP analysis.
Yep, awesome. Thank you, guys. That's my presentation.
Excellent.
Thank you, Doc.
Thanks, Doc.
That was
Great.
good. That was very good.
It's a great discussion.
Thank you. Oh, today was awesome. Everyone's presentation was fantastic. It's good to be back.
Yes, it is. Yep. Even missed. Love these discussions. Like I said, every time we talk about this case, there's something new. At least for me, there's new revelation about things, and that allows even more revelation to come. Like I had never clicked that the blood stains on the rear door actually established that wherever that blood was deposited, it was in a place where the door was left open for a period of time, where it was allowed to coagulate and dry to the point that when the door was shut, the force of the door shutting didn't cause it. Because, even that will cause it to run like the pattern of drip to change if it's still in the process of drying. So it had already dried before the door was shut.
And not only that, there were no feet impressions on that door. That meant that Teresa was knocked out. You know, like when you kick on a door to try and get out, there was none
Right.
of that.
No.
None.
Oh, yeah.
Which meant that
Yeah,
Teresa
no.
was knocked out.
No,
Knocked out.
either knocked out or incapacitated to the point where she could not get to a place to try and free herself.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. All right,
And-
guys, we've been. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, now you can see why Kathleen Zorn and her forensic experts are dangerous to the state's narrative. And now you can see why Ken Kratz is still around on X, being a gatekeeper, shutting foul play down, shutting everybody down, you know, because we are simply providing an alternative explanation. Now, notice what we did. We never included anybody's testimony. It was forensic evidence that's on and in the RAV4. That
And
was
the-
it.
Yeah. And the other thing that we need to make sure to add to this discussion is the email exchanges where both DA Gahn and DA Fallon were discussing the clandestine burial site
Yes.
Oh, that was
of the Avery property that
that
they
was-
wanted to visit.
that was in a reply rebuttal from the state.
Uh-huh.
That was
Yeah.
Fallon. Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
you're actually labeling something as a burial site for remains. Like you're calling it that now.
They
if
even
it was-
it even includes bones being found there.
Yeah.
Correct.
His
So
words, not mine.
yeah, their words. So that is pretty unusual if it truly was a peat moss bag. And what was the other thing? And they've claimed it was
Rotting
Rotten
wooden.
pallet.
yeah, I thought it was a pallet. So if it truly was only wood and peat moss bags, why would you choose to reference it as a burial site?
Clandestine as well.
Yeah,
Why
that's
indeed?
interesting.
Yep. So I fundamentally agree with you, Sunshine Christina. I think the wheels of motion in the investigators were trying to pin everything on Stephen. The trouble is they found forensic evidence outside the Avery salvage yard. Their aim was to bring everything back.
Mhm.
And
And
that's
if
why
altering if you're choosing to run an investigation where you don't have a problem moving evidence, then
Correct.
how can I have confidence that you're not also framing him?
correct. And people have written about this. It's called noble cause corruption,
Mm-hmm.
where you believe the individual is guilty, but you're about 50-50 there. And what you want to do is tip the scales and make it 99% guilt. And the way you do that is you set them up.
Yeah,
So-
but that's being kind.
Yes, if you find forensic evidence, damning forensic evidence outside of the property, you go, how the bloody hell are we going to pin this on Stephen? And the answer is you bring everything back. And what did Sergeant Jason Joe say? I started to put it all together. And
Yeah.
who was the source of inspiration? Radon seeing the fire on October the 31st. And I reckon I debunked him. Because remember when we did the deep dive into where Radon was, where he was driving and how quickly his perspective was, point of view was, he glanced that section of the salvage yard, which was lower. the salvage yard was much higher than where he was. He glanced at for a mere second as he drove around the corner. And now you trying to tell me that in that quick glance where he saw a glow, he was able to establish that there was a fire in a burned barrel. I call bullshit on that.
Yeah, they pressured him too. We know they did.
I pressured him as well.
Yep. Anyway,
And
all right.
Jason Post got it all worked out.
Yeah, he did. I worked it all out. That's a hell of a line. Anyway, we've been going almost 4 hours, guys. I think it's a good place to wrap.
Yeah, I agree.
It's been great, really
Yes,
great.
it was.
A lot of good information for people to chew on and come to your own conclusions. That's what we always say. Make your own mind up. Information is freely available. Everything that we have, virtually everything. There are a few things that we haven't published for certain reasons. We haven't done that. But 99.8% of everything that we've got is in the library. It'll be interesting to see how Remaker's case turns out, and certainly what happens in Mr. Kratz's case, his civil case against Transition. For those that may not know, he is suing Transition. Sean Reck and several other named defendants, Alan Hale. I can't remember the rest of them, but nonetheless, we'll see where that goes. If the judge is going to allow the lawsuit to continue or not. We don't know when the Kratz has filed his complaint. The defendants have replied. They heavily indicated that they want the judge to force arbitration. Get it off the books here. Let's go sit down and talk and see what it's going to take to pay you off and be done with it. But Kratz wants a jury trial. I don't know where that's going to go. None of us do. We'll see. With that, I'm going to pop this up because,
Thank you to Duke.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll pop this photo up of Brendan as our closer tonight. I was going to do one of both Stephen and Brendan, but it's we've concentrated a lot on Stephen over the years, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, and we've concentrated a lot on Brendan too, but not quite as strong, I think. And I just hope that there's some whatever that Now Rider, Doc and I've talked about this, that Drizzen and Now Rider can find something to get him out. Something. But to date, so far, we don't have anything. So unless you guys got something else to add, I'm going to take us out of here. You guys good?
All good. Thank you so much for putting it on, Jack 61.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
all good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you
Thanks.
to everyone in chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, Doc and Duke and Christina, and certainly everyone in the live chat. We had a lot of good questions. I've tried to answer some as we went. I know I've missed some. So with that said, we're going to jump out of here. I'll let this run for probably about 5 seconds or so, then I'm going to close it. So with that said, I'm going to tell you guys, this has been a Foul Play production. Good night.
Good night, everyone.